Good afternoon and welcome to the pre-agenda interviews for Wednesday, January 28, 2026 for the Chief of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police and for the Director of Public Safety. Will the clerk please read the title of the bills?
Bill 17, Resolution appointing Jason Lando as the Chief of the Bureau of Pittsburgh Police, and Bill number 20, Resolution appointing Sheldon Williams as the Director of the Department of Public Safety.
And thank you very much. And for the record, we are joined by Councilman Wilson, Councilman Coghill, Councilman Sheldon, Councilwoman Salinetro, I apologize, and Councilwoman Warwick. If you would both be willing to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background about yourselves, and why you're interested in being willing to serve.
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Council, for giving me the opportunity to come and be interviewed for this. I'm super excited about the opportunity to come back to public service. I've shared with those that I've met with and expressed my excitement about coming back. A little bit about me. One is just, as you've heard in our interviews for those that I had the opportunity to interview with, my excitement for coming back is because of my love to serve. I served in the military right out of high school. Immediately following that, I started serving in public service. I did that for 20.5 years, first as a paramedic and then as a police officer, cross-trained in various other aspects of public safety. I think you're fully aware, based off of what I have reported to you and also in my bio. Took a retirement from Pittsburgh Police to continue serving in my community as a pastor, and did that for 12 years at a fairly large church on the north side as it's focused towards community, not only in my ministerial responsibilities. And then, after feeling a time that I had accomplished some of those ministerial goals, I started serving in academia, serving students, to continue on with that. So that common thread is who I am. It's what I've done my whole life, and coming back in this role is a continuance of that service. I look to serve the members of public safety, the men and women who work in public safety in all the bureaus, and all the department, my administration that I'm responsible for. You've heard me say many times, or may have heard me say, I'm the bridge. I feel that I'm the bridge and the connecting piece, both to our public safety sector, to the community, to the administration in our public safety sector, but also my responsibilities also to those the elected officials as you all are. I'm the bridge to that as well, and making sure that we're accomplishing the goals of public safety and that I fully onboard the load, bridging those components, making sure that I'm sharing that responsibility broadly, and we're accomplishing the goals that we need to accomplish. So thank you again for allowing me to be here and to be interviewed, and I look forward to the opportunity.
Hey, good afternoon. I actually prepared a few comments, if that's okay.
Sure.
President Lavelle and members of council, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm deeply honored to have been nominated to serve as your next Chief of Police for the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police. And I'm really grateful for the trust that has been placed in me by Mayor O'Connor and his team. Returning to Pittsburgh and to the Bureau of Police feels very much like coming home for me. As you already know, I'm a Pittsburgh kid, born and raised in the city and a proud graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. I served as a police officer so far for almost 26 years. For 21 of those years, I've had the privilege of serving the people of Pittsburgh in a variety of roles, learning firsthand the values, the challenges, and the strengths that make the Pittsburgh community a unique one. Leaving Pittsburgh in 2021 to become the Chief of Police in Frederick, Maryland was definitely bittersweet for me. It was an amazing experience where I had an opportunity to build new and innovative programs and learn the intricacies of the police chief's role. I would not trade anything for my time in Frederick, but in the end, it was not home. Since returning to Pittsburgh several weeks ago, I've had an opportunity to reconnect with many of the dedicated people I worked with during my career here. And we've already begun the important work of moving the Bureau of Police forward on a number of different fronts. Downtown safety, responding to and supporting our unhoused population, rethinking how we respond to mental health emergencies in the community, and of course, those dreaded abandoned cars. This work requires a leader who knows and is closely connected to the Pittsburgh community. Throughout my career, I've worked hard to build strong, authentic, and trusting relationships with the communities I've served. Those relationships have led to programs and initiatives designed to care for those in mental health crisis, engaging marginalized and underrepresented groups, building relationships with our youth, and ensuring that our police officers have the tools and the support they need to do their jobs with both professionalism and compassion. Equally important to me has been a focus on police officer wellness and resiliency, and I know I had the chance to speak with all of you about that. I firmly believe our officers cannot take care of this community if we are not taking care of them. Supporting their mental health, their training, and their professional growth and development is not just optional, but it's essential. As excited as I am for the future, I do feel the need to address an incident that occurred in the recent past. Over the last 2 years, as you are aware, I was the target of relentless harassment from one of my former officers in Maryland, after holding that officer accountable for his unacceptable behavior while he was still employed with the police department. I ultimately responded to this former officer in a way that is out of character for me. As you are aware, I was cleared of wrongdoing and the matter has been closed, but I still felt that it was important to address that here today. I'm very proud of the reputation I have earned working closely with community members and police officers, both in Pittsburgh and in Frederick. However, I am human. I do regret my mistake, and I can assure you that was a very unique situation. It was a first in my career, and I can also assure you it will not happen again. Moving forward, if given the opportunity to serve as Pittsburgh's next chief of police, my priorities will be clear. I will focus on reducing violent crime and quality of life issues that impact residents' sense of safety and well-being. I will work to support staff wellness, accountability, and professional development at every level of the Bureau of Police. And I will seek innovative and forward-thinking approaches to recruitment and retention so that we can continue to attract and retain dedicated professionals who reflect and understand the community they serve. I'm proud of my roots in Pittsburgh, very proud of the profession I have chosen, and I'm committed to serving this city with integrity, humility, and transparency. Further, I'm committed to Pittsburgh and to the Bureau of Police for the long term. I left a pretty amazing job to come back home, and I did so because Pittsburgh is my home, and I do not intend on leaving this city anytime soon. I look forward to working in partnership with council, city leadership, department members, and our community to keep Pittsburgh safe and welcoming for all. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much. Let the record reflect, we've also been joined by Councilman Strasburger as well as Councilwoman Gross. And before we can allow you to answer questions from members, you are both aware that your testimony has to be under oath. So I now actually have to administer an oath to you. So I'll begin with Mr. Sheldon Williams. Do you, Mr. Sheldon Williams, solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this council shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And do you further affirm that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the Department of Public Safety to which you have been nominated?
I do affirm.
Thank you very much. And for the chief, do you, Jason Lando, solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this council shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And do you further affirm that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the Bureau of Police to which you have been nominated?
I do.
Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to open it up to our Public Safety Chair, and then we'll start at the top and work our way down. Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, gentlemen. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate your service or your willingness to serve the city of Pittsburgh. I'm going to just start with, most of my questions are going to be for the both of you. So I didn't know if we were going to take you together or singularly, so I'm glad you're here together so we don't have to repeat. But my first question is, just to be clear, because of the issues we had in the past, neither one of you are going to take secondary employment, a salary from somebody else while working as chief or public safety director for the city of Pittsburgh.
Absolutely not.
I won't take another salary, but I want to make you aware that I'm still an instructor. I had worked out with the mayor's office. I teach a class at the university, but that's the commitment of my extra work.
No, I understand that, Mr. Williams, and that does not include, in my eyes at least, training. I know Chief Jones also, we like to spread our expertise around to other municipalities if we can. And if it requires a paycheck for accommodations for you to go somewhere to train or do something, as you just said, that's not a problem. I'm talking full-time job that's going to take you away from your duties here. So
A full-time commitment is to the city of Pittsburgh with
Understood.
no others.
Understood.
Absolutely.
Great. So I'll start with you, Chief Lando. You've been acting now for a month, pretty much.
Yes.
About a month. So what do you see the needs or deficiencies or attributes, just your perspective as to the Pittsburgh Police Department, what we might need to do to improve it, things we can improve on, just a general summarization.
Yeah, in all of the meetings and events that I've been to, I really hit on 4 key points, and one is to continue to drive down both violent and quality of life crimes. I was very happy when I came back to see the numbers, the violent crime numbers are down significantly, but that doesn't mean we just, stop. We have to keep on it. Quality of life crimes as well. A second priority that I talk about a lot is officer wellness. I think in the past several years, you've seen a lot of things come out that show that that we need as a profession to do a better job of taking care of those that are taking care of the community. Back in Frederick, we were able to build a pretty innovative program and bring in a full-time individual whose entire job it was to take care of the mental health and wellness of our officers, and that is one of my goals here. Third is professional development. We have a lot of young, new supervisors, and I want to make sure that they're prepared not just to supervise, but to truly lead. And so that's another position that we're looking at, is to bring in a full-time development coach, a professional development coach, to make sure that we are meeting those needs. So those sergeants and lieutenants and commanders that we're putting out there are leading the right way, and the officers that we recruit into the department have true role models to look up to. And then finally, of the 4 kind of key pillars would be the recruitment and the retention. I always say we have to look in-house first. So recruitment's great, but if people come here and they're not seeing something that they like and that they're comfortable with, they're going to go somewhere else. So I think the recruitment and the retention piece are both equally as important. We want to make sure that we are building a department that people want to stay at for 20 or more years, and that we're not, as people have referred to, we're not the farm team where they come here, they get great training, they get great experience for 2 or 3 years, and then they go off to the suburbs. And so looking at those 4 things are going to be the big priorities over the next year or 2.
Good deal. Just elaborate a little bit on the wellness officer. I know you had that in Frederick, and I know you're a big believer in it, and I know a lot, if not most, major municipalities have such a person, a professional person. Right. And that is, in my eyes, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is a person to deal with if a police officer, one of our police officers is in a shooting, or is, a fatal shooting, or whatever it is, just the rigors that come along with the job. It's kind of like a therapist for them to talk to. Is that correct?
Right. So this isn't someone that you send an officer to after a critical incident. This person, and the reason I feel so passionate about bringing them into the agency is making sure that they're embedded as part of the fabric of the agency, so they are known, and officers feel comfortable with them. And I should say that there is someone doing this work on a part-time basis now, and she would be a very integral part of the team. So I don't want to take anything away from the work she's doing, but to have one part-time person doing this for 700 or 800 people, it just isn't enough. So this person would coordinate all of the wellness programs, and would also be an actual clinician. They would go to roll calls. They would go out on ride-alongs. They really need to get to know the officers, so the officers feel comfortable talking to them. I can tell you that when we implemented this in Maryland, initially, people were like, "Oh, we don't need that here," and by the end of the first year, we had several officers actively signed up for regular therapy, which I never thought we'd see. And so it just shows that it is badly needed, even if people don't really want to admit it. But this person's role initially would be to build the program and to be a clinician. And then as we're able to grow it, the goal is that this person would kind of be the manager or the director, and we'd have several clinicians. But that's going to probably take years to bring to fruition.
And we talked about that in private, as we talked about all things considered. It comes with being the chief. Does that person have to have a license of some sort? Is this a professional, you know?
Yes, this is not a sworn member of the
Okay,
department.
right,
this
right.
is a licensed clinician and it's
A licensed clinician?
clinician.
Is that the, okay.
Licensed clinician and also HIPAA. It's important to say that HIPAA would apply. So if someone signs up to have, if they're doing a ride along and they're just having a conversation, that's one thing. But if this person signs up to actually seek regular ongoing therapy, then like the chiefs and the director, no one would get to know who that is. It would be, they'd be
It's
HIPAA
private.
protected.
Yeah,
But
sure.
because the person is a clinician. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is one of the things that you had in Frederick. You had a full-time.
We were able to do that for my last. We were able to onboard that person in my last year, so I got the chance to write the job description, interview, onboard the person, and be there for a full year to kind of watch the program come to fruition. And it was just really it was really neat to see how officers began to change their views on mental health and to warm up to this person. And someone brand new comes in. Cops, I say there's two things that a lot of cops don't like, the way things are right now and anything different. But you see, like, over time, this person, we picked the right person.
Yeah.
And I think that's key,
Right,
is picking
right.
the right person.
Right.
And it got to the point where this person would just jump into cars and go out on ride-alongs, show up at roll call, and was accepted and welcomed into the agency.
right.
And so that would be the goal here.
I'm glad to hear that officers in Frederick were reluctant about it as well, because I got the same thing from the rank and file here. I will tell you, we don't need that person, right? What do we need that
100%,
person for? I don't need a therapist. I don't need a psychiatrist, whatever, their impression of it is. So I'm glad to hear that they were reluctant, but then warmed up to it, and you find it to be a vital piece. And as I told you in private, I'll do everything I can, because we want you to succeed in the way you feel, you need to succeed in the city of Pittsburgh. So whatever that position or positions come with as far as financial, payroll, then we'll try to get you that position. You said we have one part-time now, and that's great and fine, and whether we elevate her or get you somebody else, that's yet to be seen, but you'll have my commitment that we'll try to get you that, because I want you to have everything you need to succeed. So,
Thank you
welcome.
very much. Thank
And
you.
Mr. Williams, I'm not going to go on too long because there's a lot of members here, of course, but I want to specifically talk to you, and obviously I want you to chime in, Chief, afterwards. Recruitment and retention, you and I have had this conversation. I love what you say about it. We do not want to be a farm club. I've been battling this for the longest time, whether it's, this goes back to Wendell Histrich and then through Lee Schmidt. We can't somehow find a way. For me, it would be when you sign up for the Pittsburgh Police and we decide to put you through our expensive training, best training I feel like we have amongst any police department, at least in the state of Pennsylvania. I would like a commitment, a 5-year commitment from that recruit. Apparently, we can't do that legally right now. I would just like that commitment from you, because I know you feel strongly about it as well. And I also want you to address retention. How do we keep from losing police officers? We say retired, but truth is 80% of our police officers that retire take employment elsewhere, and because they're going on the greener pastures, they qualify for our pension, and now they're going to work for the county or the DA's office or some other municipality. I know, because I know a lot of the police chiefs, and it's an ongoing kind of humorous joke with us. We got another one of your men or women this week, and I'm like, well, thanks a lot, just leave them alone for a little bit, because we're suffering in numbers. And so I would like to know, number one, are you committed to trying to get new recruits to stay? Number two, what your strategy is to keep the officers that have been here for a long time?
So I would say, first of all, my efforts in recruiting, I've done that previously, participated with HR and working alongside them to find creative ways to do recruiting. Before I got into this role, this is when I was a police officer, actively participated and try to think through some ways. I worked alongside Director Kellerman back in the day before she was director, and trying to have some of these creative. So I say it because I feel it was important about getting out and very, very strategic about how do we go out to really communicate that this is a great place to work where people will want to come. And so it's going to be very important. I meant exactly what I said. I struggle, and I say struggle to be kind with words, to see the investment we put into our public servants, specifically our police officers, and then they go off someplace else. I think Pittsburgh is one of the best places to work, not because I'm a Pittsburgher. There's just all the cross opportunities you have within the department, for which is one of those valuable reasons why people handpick individuals from our department. So one of the big issues is that, when it comes retaining them, you asked about retention, they're going on to other things. It's not because there's other areas that they just desire to work. Some of it has to do with the pay and stuff like that. And so I want us to be looking and addressing some of those burdens that our police officers have for wanting and desiring to be here. I also want to have some better opportunities of communicating to our own residents who vibe here with the city of Pittsburgh to make sure that they make this a career choice through all of our bureaus, like our police, fire, and EMS, and want them to find that as an attractive career opportunity. We see across the board, all across the country, people aren't going to public service like they used to. When I took the test, there was about 3,000 people that took that test. We don't see those numbers anymore. So I want to bring back the interest. And so if we do that, grow the interest, some of the ways of doing that is like not just doing career fairs, like, can we do mentoring or modeling type of where we can demonstrate that these are the different ways, not just on a one-on-one, give you a pamphlet and say this is police work. Like, can we really intro and find a way to really give them a good look into what police work is or the opportunities that exist that might grow some interest, and then following on with that, like who's tracking these individuals who have shown some initial interest, and are we still incubating that interest within them? And I say that broadly. Also too, like if we can have some better on-ramps. I know we have some veteran officers and stuff too, and again, it gets to be difficult to say, for some of the reasons why officers are leaving, but let's find if there is a pool of individuals who want to come here, and we can find some easier ways to get some of those who are already trained to come to serve with us as well. So growing our department is going to take some work, but I want to put intentional work to have people who do this, who might be doing it more so than just one-offs, that have a heart and a passion towards recruitment, and give them the tools necessary to go out there and to be able to attract those who want to come and work for us.
Right. And my thoughts on that, just so and we shared this together, is number one, the Pittsburgh Police Department has opportunities where you could elevate to a sergeant, a lieutenant, a commander, a chief. Where, if you're going to Bethel Park or Mount Lebanon, you're going to make more money. We can't compete with them, their salary. We just can't do it. And it's going to be a long time if we can ever do that. So we do have opportunity here that you don't have in other. You're just basically a patrol person in those other municipalities. You might have sergeant or something of that nature, but there's not a room for an advancement like we have in the city of Pittsburgh. So that's attractive. But I think we need to aggressively recruit. I'm glad to hear you say about job fairs. I don't think they're effective. I think we need to get into our schools, into just, the communities. I'd like to recruit from the inner city. I'd like to recruit Pittsburgh residents to, and really you got to teach them what an admirable profession it is. And that's taken a hit over the past 5 years at least, okay? So there's a lot of challenges there. And as you said, used to be that convention center would be filled, 2,000-3,000, applicants. Now, there's maybe 30, 40 if we're lucky to show interest. So the profession in general has taken a hit, and for a lot of reasons. But salary, we have a hard time keeping up with. You mentioned you were a pastor. Is that full time? Is that just on? Are you still doing that work?
I'm not pastoring right now.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I do some mentoring for younger pastors who like to come on and vet their call, but I'm not pastoring at all.
Okay.
I'm ordained still. But
Right. Okay. And I'll just give you a chance, and then I'll see to other members to comment on recruitment and retention if you want to add anything. I mean,
Just add one thing. So we've already started the work of creating an employee advisory committee. I think it's really important. I think one of the things, if we can't afford to pay more and do some of like the shiny things, I think something that means a lot to our officers is just like having a say in how their police department operates, and hearing some of their frustrations and just being available to them. So we've already put out the solicitation for anyone who's interested, and we're going to pick representation from across the entire police department, and we're going to meet monthly, and this is going to be our frontline staff, so police officers and our civilian staff, meeting with the chief and the assistant chiefs. And that's so we can hear directly from them, like what do they need out, whether it's out in the street every day, if they're detectives, in their daily work, what do they need to feel more supported? And I think when they feel like they're being heard and they have a voice in how their own department operates, the morale comes up. And I think morale, more than money, is one of the biggest things in policing that people, you don't see a lot of people that leave departments to chase dollar signs. They leave for better working conditions. And so the whole point of this employee advisory committee is so we can hear directly from them, unfiltered, what they need to be supported, and the chiefs can start implementing those things.
No doubt. And I just got a couple comments. You come with a very good reputation. I didn't know you before you came here, but I do know a lot of the rank and file. And it's hard for me to find somebody that in the rank and file that has a bad word to say about you. So that is a big, big bonus. And, usually those voices come out, even if, so I haven't heard any negativity. You come with a stellar reputation. You were one of 3 finalists when we did the national search. It was me who called you after we lost the chief. You remember that? So I take some credit for bringing you here. I remind the mayor of that, okay? And I told him you were willing to come back, as you told me on the phone that night. So he wasn't the mayor then, but of course, so I'll take some credit for that. And Mr. Williams, our mutual friend, with EMS, that I told you I would call. And, you and I didn't know each other either, but I've seen you, had good conversations with you so far. I've seen you in public. I appreciate, and I think you have good leadership skills from what I know and what I see. He gave you a ringing endorsement, I will tell you, as you suspected. So that's all good. One final question, and then I'll move on to somebody else. What do you see as the right size police force? I believe we're somewhere around 740 right now. My personal opinion is 900. I would just like to know your thoughts on that, or just throw a number out.
So, without actually, doing an analysis and getting a number, so just anecdotally, I would like to see us back at 900, if that's possible. Just as I go around to all the stations and all the work units, if we want to be able to provide all of the, and perhaps the extra stuff isn't the right word, but for lack of a better term, I'm really big in community engagement. We have to make sure we're out in the street answering the calls, responding to emergencies before we do anything else. If we want to get back to that point where we can be everywhere doing all of the things that the community expects, I do think that 900 would be
and that will
appropriate.
also help with overtime and wear and tear and exhaust with officers. Right now they're being forced certain overtimes. Yeah. I will say one other thing. I heard you were chasing criminals in the South Side on foot since you've been back. We need you to be healthy. We don't need you to pull up with a pulled hamstring or anything.
Sir, I
we
can't
need you
help
on the
myself
job.
sometimes.
So I know you can't help yourself, but good work. And so that's it for me now, Mr. President. I appreciate you both being here. I find you both highly qualified, and very, very looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, sir.
Council.
Thank you very much, Councilman Strasburger.
Thank you, Mr. President.
What's-
Thank you both for being here, and thank you for your willingness to serve in your respective roles.
Thank you.
I know that neither of them is easy. And so I'll start with a question for both of you, and this is something that I discussed with each of you when we met one-on-one, and that's discussing how you approach not just community engagement, but community trust building during a time when I would say that trust in law enforcement could be uneven at best. What's your approach? What are some strategies that work? What are some ideas that you can bring from previous experiences or that build on that building on existing programs or ideas that we have here going?
Thank you, Councilmember Schultzberg. I would say, first of all, that experientially, as a younger person growing up in and around Pittsburgh, and also with work, and I also navigated some of the more adversarial times we had between our public servants and our communities, and working towards getting to those healthier places. I can tell you, as an attestment to the work that has been done in our public servants, even moving forward. I saw us grow through some of those tough times, but the continual work, even after I departed the department, I had reached out. He was commander. Then Jason and I have history well before he worked with the police department because he had his start in EMS as well, not with the city. But I reached out because we were friends, and I commended him on his great work in a very tough place to be able to build those relationships. I say that because I have firsthand experience, my wife being born and raised in an area of the city that saw some of those more troubling type of relationships, and seeing that what had existed in her experience and my experience back then, and seeing where it is now. But that speaks to the great effort, not only just with Chief Lando, it's also with the men and women that worked alongside us. So I embrace all those efforts and growing with community. But I'll say that any philosophical approaches that I would bring to what we do to make sure that we continue to connect in community, I've expressed to you as that philosophically, I'm gonna say from a broader, there are 3 ways I think that we can engage with community, and especially how we roll out and we do things with community. We can do for the community, we can do to the community, but I want us to do things with the community. And I'm gonna search and find those collaborative and cooperative ways. And it's not just with one-off programming, like really trying to strategize ways to strengthen what works well, but also grow these opportunities. When you talk about the trust bonds, they exist. I was pleased to see, and I mean this, across all the zones that I went to. I mean, I'm looking intently and hearing, listening intently to what people were saying. And across the board, what I say, stepping into this, there's great work that has been done across our zones, all of your districts, where I've heard people just make, how much they embrace. Now, I understand there might still be some challenges out there, but it is a healthy thing to be stepping into, given some of those things that I talked about historically. So to that, I want to preserve that and grow it. And that's what I say from a very philosophical approach. What are we doing with our community? And that's embracing these opportunities that our public servants feel that they're integral, they're a stakeholder in our communities. And when we serve, we're doing this because we do this because it is not only just our duty, it is also how we care because we're part of the community. And I want to make sure that that's embraced and emboldened in ways that our citizens understand that our public servants are right there beside them.
Thank you. 2 words that come to mind are partnership and transparency. And I think that's something years ago our profession wasn't particularly great at. Like the director talked about, we did things to the community and for the community, but not necessarily with them. So one of the things that I'm really big on is partnering with the community. So when I was the Zone 5 commander, we established what was called the Commander's Cabinet of Community Leaders, where every other month we would get together and we would do something just to touch on what's happening in policing right now, what questions do people have, how do we build better relationships, just really be open and transparent so the community could ask questions. When I went to Frederick, we kind of did the same thing, and we created the Chiefs Community Advisory Board. And every quarter, we brought in about 50 community members, and we really let them decide what they wanted to hear about. We would put a survey out ahead of time. If there was a high-profile use of force incident somewhere in the country, that would maybe be the focus of the topic that evening. We allowed the entire group to run through shoot, don't shoot scenarios so they could understand from a unique perspective what an officer faces when they're in a situation where they have to decide whether or not to fire their weapon. So we did a lot of education, and they educated us as well. It was a 2-way street. So a lot of transparency in those partnerships. One of the other things that we did that I thought was phenomenal, and I'd love to look at implementing it here, is we started a multicultural liaison unit, and we picked 5 different communities from around Frederick that we felt had the most strained relationship with the police. And it's going to be different in every city. For instance, in Frederick, one of those communities was the deaf and hard of hearing community because the Maryland School for the Deaf was in Frederick. That might not be one of the communities that we select here necessarily, but our LGBT community, our African American community, our Hispanic community, and our Asian community were the 5 that we identified. And we we made sure there were officers that volunteered to be liaisons to those communities, and they would go to meetings and events. If there was a high-profile incident, they would go out and they would do some of that work after the incident to, figure out how we could do outreach or rebuild trust, whatever it was. So I think identifying liaisons to certain marginalized communities is really important, and it helps those communities feel like they have a voice in the police department. So again, a number of examples, but it all comes back to just being willing to be a partner and be open and transparent. Just one last thing I want to touch on, because I'm really big in it, is youth outreach and engagement. One of the things that we did in Zone 5 when I was commander there was we built a youth outreach program where we would actually go into some of the schools. We went into Westinghouse. It was really cool how it worked out, but we knew a lot of these kids, when they would see officers in uniform, they'd be apprehensive. So we would take 10 officers at a time, about 10 officers, and we'd go into the library and we would meet with 10 or 15 students. And this was all worked out with the school ahead of time. It was all predetermined who the kids would be. But we didn't wear uniforms. And we let the kids come in, and all they knew is that we were the guest speakers for the day. And we ate lunch with them, and we hung out with them. And after about a half an hour, they're like, yeah, you guys are pretty cool. So who are you? And then we'd say, oh, okay, here, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Commander Lando. I'm the Zone 5 police commander. And the room just fell silent. And then the next person, I'm Sergeant so-and-so, I'm Officer so-and-so. And by the third person, it was always, are you all cops? And we're like, yes, we are. And they're like, but you're cool. So how could you all be cops? And we're like, see, that's the thing. You only know us as police. You don't know us as human beings. And so I'd love to look for ways to do some of that get back to doing that youth outreach work. Again, we talk about staffing. Right now, I don't have 10 people to take into a school. They're out answering calls. I'd love to get back to a place where we have the staffing to do innovative programs like that, because at the end of the day, when we would talk to these kids and compare their comments to the beginning of the day, it was unbelievable to hear their comments. And that was after spending 3 hours with them. So can you imagine if we had a really robust program where we had them for weeks or months at a time, how we could improve those relationships? So that would be one of the goals.
Thank you both. This next question is, I think, mostly for Acting Chief Lando, but Acting Director, please step in if you'd like as well. On the mind of many of my constituents and many more residents throughout the city is the presence of federal agents in the form of ICE, Border Control, and adjacent agencies, and the possibility that many more agents could come to our city in the future. Can you clarify the policy of the Bureau of Police with regard to cooperation with ICE and with regard to information gathering or sharing of a person's immigration status?
Yes. So, as I said, I've been a police officer for going on 26 years now. In my entire career, I've never asked someone's immigration status. This is not a new thing for the Bureau of Police. It's unfortunate to see what's happening now, but it's not a new thing for the Pittsburgh Police. It wasn't for most police departments. I think have very similar. Most major city police departments have very similar policies. Our job is not immigration enforcement. I've never, like I said, we've never asked someone's immigration status. Our job is to protect and serve the residents of Pittsburgh and to respond to crimes in progress or, follow up on crimes. It's just not, I'm just trying to think of the best way to convey this. We don't have an interest in immigration enforcement. If we were to be called to a scene during a crisis situation or an emergency, like some of the things you see on TV, we have a legal and a moral obligation to respond, assess the situation, and then get out of there as quickly as possible. And that is what we have told our officers. And as a matter of fact, should ICE get on the radio, well, they don't have our radios, but should they call 911 and request us to respond, a supervisor must go and assess the situation. And if it's not a life-threatening situation or a situation that needs to be addressed right now, like they're just calling for a transport, let's say, we leave. We don't do transports. I just want to be very cautious about not putting police officers in a situation where they could be charged or investigated or held accountable by the federal government because they are refusing to respond in a critical incident. And so the only time that Pittsburgh police would ever go is if someone's yelling for us in an emergency, and we would go to assess the situation and make sure that no one's getting hurt. And then that is it. There was one other thing I wanted to touch on with that. For me, I think it's very important that I want everyone in the city of Pittsburgh to feel comfortable picking up the phone and calling 911 if they need the police. I don't ever want to hear about a situation where someone didn't call for help because they were so worried that the first thing that Pittsburgh police were going to ask when they got there was immigration status. And the other thing is we've spent so much time and so much effort trying to build relationships in our communities. This would be like us throwing that all out the window and taking steps backwards if I were to say, yeah, we're going to take up immigration enforcement as one of our duties. We just don't do that. But I just wanted to be really clear about we also can't intervene and prevent federal agents from doing their jobs. To do so would risk our police officers being federally charged with a crime potentially, and as their chief, I can't put them in that situation.
And I simply want to, as a matter of record, for your hearing, but also as a matter of record, that everything that the chief has said, I openly endorse and embrace. This mayor has been very clear, Mayor O'Connor has been very clear that he wants a welcoming city, that we will not collaborate or coordinate any efforts with ICE or these federal law enforcement officers, and you will not get an edict from me that would change from that. Exactly what the chief's approach is to ensuring the safety. It's incumbent upon our public servants to do that. And even as much as I've met with some that I would come against any of by strongly expressing that I felt that there was a sentiment that would change from that would be incubating from downline coming up, we would squash that. Like, notwithstanding, we want across the board in all of our public safety bureaus, but this one being challenging for our law enforcement officers, we want to be a welcoming city. And anybody who would embrace something differently, that we would challenge that firmly and to ensure that we're carrying that out to the fullest extent.
Thank you. I know some of my other colleagues will have questions on that topic, so I'll leave that topic for now. And if there are any other questions I have second round, I'll ask them. So shifting gears to my next question, we've talked about recruitment. In 2020, 2021, there was a lot of discussion in the city and on council around strategies for recruitment to attract officers who are committed to a guardian mindset versus the warrior mindset. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on the best ways to go about doing that and finding the people who are going to fit that characteristic.
So several years ago, I was actually I was one of the lead instructors on Pittsburgh's procedural justice initiative, where we trained the entire department in the concepts of procedural justice, and we talked about just those things. I think, obviously, recruitment and finding the right candidates are very important, but I also think the way we run our training academy and our field training program is equally as important. We want to make sure from day one we're instilling those values in the officers. I have to just anecdotally, I'll just share with you that since I've been back, obviously there's a lot of people I know and I remember, but there's a lot of fresh faces. I joke around, I was stopped by a call in the Hill District yesterday, I think it was yesterday, and 5 officers arrived as backup because it was supposed to be a violent domestic, and they got out of their cars, and I was like, I've never seen any of you before. But I kind of just took a step back and let them handle the situation, and I watched the way they de-escalated and the way they talked to the female half and the male half, and there was a child involved, and the way they were kind of protecting the child. And I was just so impressed because I think back to 25 or 26 years ago. I mean, we spent almost 45 minutes in the house trying to de-escalate the situation. I just don't remember that 25 years ago. I remember all right, someone's going to jail now because we need to get on to the next call. So I know that's just one example, but I use that example because I think that our academy staff right now is really doing the right thing to make sure that these officers hit the street with that guardian mindset. And every call that I've been on and stopped by the past few days, the past few weeks, I've just watched the officers operate, and I'm like, wow, these guys and ladies get it. Like they're really good. So I think it goes back to the training, and then the other part of it is holding officers accountable when they don't do the right thing. I haven't had very much disciplinary action come across my desk in the past month that I've been here. The stuff that has been mostly like discourtesy type stuff, and that is the conversation I have with those officers is like the trust in the police department rises and falls on how people feel they're being treated by the police, and so the discourtesy stuff does not work for me. But again, I think that our academy is really on point and doing the right thing, and that's just something that I know we need to stay on top of.
Thank you.
I would echo that as well. I mean, in making sure and ensuring that what does care look like for our constituency? It's not just in your duties, but how we care for people. I just would be very forward-leaning into making sure that we had a culture that cares for people, and any efforts that would devalue people, even in the commission of doing your duties, would be a stand against that. And so I openly embrace and what Chief Lando was saying, but I want to say this too, that is the number one complaint against police officers, not use of force. It's discourtesy, you know, and sometimes how our approach is and just in interrelating with people. And so by making sure and ensuring that how we continue those relationships. And again, there are times where things escalate. Some people don't like to be told firmly sometimes. That's not the times I'm talking about. But just being careful that how we relating with one another sometimes in those exchanges could stop or thwart a lot of things just based on how people experience how you care for them. And so I would continue to encourage that.
Thank you both. Last question. Thanks to my colleagues for indulging me. We all know that part of public safety is traffic safety and feeling safe and comfortable when you're traveling our streets, regardless of the mode of transportation. We also know that between 2018 and 2022, fatal crashes increased by 71% in Pittsburgh, while homicides decreased. So what can we do to ensure that officers are helping to rein in unsafe driving all over the city? We've done great work engineering our roads and continuing to engineer our roads and our traffic intersections to make them safer. And there's much more work to do. But I do believe that part of that is enforcement, ensuring that people know that they're going to pay some sort of a price if they are driving recklessly, are speeding, are passing people on two-lane roads, are running stop signs and red lights, and just putting people's lives in danger. What can we do to bolster that further?
I'm sorry, Chief.
No, go for it.
I'm saying specifically, and I know Councilmember Warwick will ask some questions, but because you raised that, and she had raised in our meeting, that I embrace the concepts of having these methodologies where we're trying to be more safe on our streets. And I know that it comes with some burden from some people in our communities, but I witness myself, like, how fast people travel around our streets, and it's unsafe for our kids and stuff like that. It's part of public safety. So I would approach it with a very balanced approach and make sure that public safety is participating in those conversations, getting our heads around the understanding why they need to happen, and also bringing forth some of the issues that public safety would have as we're putting some of the traffic calming measures in and work collaboratively. And so I just want to give you my assurances from somebody that has to lead those departments broadly, that I embrace the concepts of that because it is aiding public safety, but I want to make sure that I'm also bringing to the table some of the concerns and stuff that public safety will have, so that we're working collaboratively with those teams that are rolling these things in. So that's my commitment.
Thank you. Just two things come to mind. First is making sure that our supervisors, when we get complaints, that those complaints are being assigned and addressed in a timely fashion. I say officers enjoy doing all types of different things. Not everyone likes to do traffic, but it is part of their job. And so if we have traffic complaints, that they're assigned by the supervisors and they're held accountable for addressing those complaints. And so I think that's one thing. The other thing is that goes to safety for both the officers and the motorists is looking at new technologies that are out there. I know right now there's discussions about red light cameras. Just today, before I came here, I was on a meeting with a tech company that does, and I don't know how they do it because I'm not a tech person, but they literally can do like real-time speed mapping over an entire geographical area. So we can, as law enforcement, we can go on and see like, okay, right now, what are the speeds on the certain roadways? Where are the like red, orange, yellow, green areas? Where are the red areas that we can send people to right now because we're seeing people are exceeding the speed limit, driving dangerously? Just so you know, this was the first time I'd heard of this. It's pretty interesting. It has nothing to do with cameras or monitoring or anything. They actually use technology that's already like in vehicles that are out there. Have you heard of this? It's pretty interesting. They're out there driving around, and they can aggregate this data and say, hey, like right now on Route 51, like we're seeing the average speed is 60 some miles per hour based on pulling all this data from actual motorists. And that'll allow us to say, okay, well, at 5 o'clock today, this is where we're seeing the issues. This is where we're going to send our resources. So it helps us kind of as a force multiplier to address those traffic issues. So I think for us, it's just being diligent and staying on top of those things.
That's great. Thank you. Look forward to the finding out the average speed of Bigelow Boulevard. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, okay, that exhausts my questions. I appreciate you both answering the questions and being here today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize. I'm going to ask one question. I have another engagement to get to.
Absolutely.
And with that, I want to ask each of you, what's something that happened in your career that changed how you lead?
So what's something that happened that
In your career that changed how you lead?
for me, I'd shared with a couple of council members, becoming a pastor actually helped, and I think helps me in this capacity where I'm at now, and I'll share. I have a pretty, wide array of public service experience. You see that. Serving in that capacity actually widen my perspective when it comes to care, and I think that informs me differently. Like having a different opportunity to really get into the lived experience with people, walking alongside people and journeying with people along a timeline that's different than when me just going and serving them as a public servant. Really gave me a wider perspective of what does care mean. I mean, and until you've done something like that, and I'm also a therapist, I retooled as well. I have a counseling and a master's in counseling. So it just widens a perspective for me. And that's one thing that changed in my leadership, because I think it allowed me to have some additional tools to inform how I lead broadly because of what my requirements are, especially with so much that is required in public safety as I'm coming to learn. There's so much that's involved there. So by me having those opportunities, I think just having that experiential opportunity to walk as that has been a better informing aspect that helps me to lead today.
For me, I would say it was when I was promoted to commander back in 2014. Up until then, I was an officer, a detective, a sergeant, a lieutenant. I was very internally focused. So, whether it was working with officers, leading officers as a sergeant, leading shift as a lieutenant, you tend to be very internally focused, and you think about like more of the law and order side of policing. Hey, let's go out there and write some tickets today. We're getting complaints about drugs on this corner. Let's go make some arrests. It wasn't until I became a commander and I went out to Zone 5 where you really that's the first time you're really in a position where you are with the community just as much as you're with your officers. And that definitely changed my perspective on things, because when you hear from the community, they say, yes, we don't want guns on our street. We don't want drugs on our street. But we also feel like sometimes when you're in our neighborhoods that you're an occupying force, and we're just as scared of the police as we are of the bad guys. And the first time I heard that, I was like, what? It opened my eyes. And as you start to build those relationships with the community, you realize, and that's why I go back to it has to be a partnership, like we really have to start viewing the community as our partners. And that's why we did so much of that work back in 2014, 15, 16. I hope I got the years right. I'm pretty sure I got the years right. And I'm also very proud now to see these younger officers are having that instilled in them at a much earlier age, because it took me a long time to learn that. And so I think watching these officers and the way they operate now, and they have that community caretaker mindset rather than we're going to go out and police over the community, we're going to police with them. I wish I would have had that a lot younger on the job, but when I became commander, and I'm not going to use any names here, but I know this person's probably watching and going to text me and say, you know, that's me that taught you that. A very close community member out in Zone 5. But that's, for me, that's what shifted in my career. So.
All right, thanks for those answers. And I look forward to working with each of you, and we'll definitely work through a lot together in the coming years. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Councilman Charlotte.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you for your willingness to serve. As I said, at the Zone 3 Public Safety meeting, these are the most important hires of Mayor O'Connor, and I think that there's a reason why all of us felt the need to dig out our cars and get here today, for your meetings here, because often after after the mayor himself, it's you or the individuals that a lot of folks interact with and see as the city and are in front of the cameras. So these are really important positions that I think we all take very seriously here. I'm going to set up my questions. I've got some for Acting Director Williams and some for Acting Director Lando, and then a couple for both of you, if that's okay. And we'll start with Mr. Williams here. So one of the things that, as we've kind of all talked, or as other members have asked questions here, we've talked a lot about policing. You've brought up policing a lot. But policing is really only a portion of the role that you take. You've got all the other bureaus, fire, EMS, animal control, all the other things that are in your department there. How do you plan on making sure that, although I've heard you talk a lot about policing, that you're not a second police chief?
So, and don't choose to be either. I'll leave it. You got it. And so one of my aspects, when we talked about, because some of the question was kind of geared towards that, and so I also tried to say philosophically how I would lead across the bureaus. One of the things that I value bringing to this position is I've served in multiple aspects as a paramedic, as a police officer. I did very minimal amount I'm a trained national firefighter as well. And I did very minimal with that. And I've told my fire counterparts that I respect what they do, and I will stay away from it because of what I experienced with firefighting. But reason why, I'm being somewhat in emergency management as well in hazmat. I was one of the few, if not the first, I don't know that, for Pittsburgh's team. I was the first police officer, I think, to be actually a member of our gold team. I don't know that to be absolutely accurate, but I pressed to be a part of our hazmat team. Why did I do those things? I like interoperability and interagency cooperation is one of the reasons why I went forward. I had an understanding of some things. Why I went back to get trained in fire, and I explained in my interview. It was after 9/11. One of the things that that impacted me the most was that the interagency cooperation, and I'm not criticizing it, but did that contribute to not being able to do some of the rescues and stuff because of some of the things that the burdens are with how people connect. I look forward to the opportunities to do that, to across the board, to weave together our bureaus, to work more collaboratively. I talked about making sure back when I was in a bureau, we had training opportunities where we had all the resources coming together to train together. I want to provide those opportunities moving forward. But also, I think I have a sensitive ear. I can hear things differently, not somewhat from a siloed one bureau only. I can hear from them and understand some of the language. I don't know all things when it comes to those different bureaus, to even include policing, but I do have a sensitivity. But my antenna raises high based off of certain things that they say. So I think that's the value I bring, is this, my experience, not just being trained. I've traveled around this country for 14, 15 years training, not just police officers, training EMS, fire, military. And so I bring these experiences, the plethora of those experiences, to this position, and thinking of ways where I can weave those together to make sure our bureaus are the best they can be.
Well, and thank you. And I understand just the nature of this, that we're going to probably talk a lot about police, but it is important that they're not the only employees under you here. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Office of Nighttime Economy. So that is one of the things that you'll be overseeing here. Since we had our conversation and in your time here, what is your vision for what the Office of Nighttime Economy under public safety should be doing, and how have your conversations with Allison Hardin gone?
So I have a lot of individuals, and I have not sat down. I met them. We've had some preliminary conversations. But as I explained to them, I want to know what's working well, and I also want to know what we can do better. I know that there's some challenges to some of the things that are involved with nighttime economy, and you and I talked about some of those, but I want to grow our opportunities. I mean, we have to be a place that's attractive to people to want to come and to have some of these opportunities that include some places in your district. But I want to have those healthy ways. We know some of the issues and the great work that has been done to protect the South Side after some of the issues, and I have given you some assurances in our meeting that I want to work alongside those teams and to grow that, to give some other opportunities. Some of your concerns you raised, that needs to be a destination spot for people to want to go. And some of the problems that you bring up, if there are ways in my department that we can come around alongside that to deconflict some issues or try to provide some opportunities that can encourage healthier ways of participating so that we don't have some of the inflection points or some of the issues we have, I'm going to encourage those. So I don't have all of the ideas that nighttime economy, but because I haven't gotten to that part yet in the short amount of time I've had since coming on with tackling some other responsibilities. But my executive assistant will assure you that was one of the first things that I said. I want to meet with each and every group, and I meet with them individually to find out what are they doing that works well. I want to know how can I support you to do things better, and nighttime economy is going to be on one of those where I'll get to connect with them to figure out some things.
To be clear, you haven't met with them yet.
I just met them. I haven't met with them as a group
Okay.
to figure out. No.
Although I guess not technically in your department, but something you'll have a lot of oversight over, is the Disruptive Properties Program. What is your view for disruptive properties? How will public safety interact with that? What will we be doing in the future with this program?
Yeah, I have not. Eager to meet with me again. All these departments are very eager to meet, and we given assurances that we're not. I'm just walking through some other components on board. They've all been clamoring. That's one of the departments. She has let me know specifically she's ready to meet about, disruptive properties. Here's what I can tell you. One of the issues, if there are things that I can move out of the way, that we can move things along so we can have some positive resolve of some of these issues, that's what I'm going to encourage. So understanding we have these issues, I also understand why these are issues that go unresolved, that can cause citizens and cause issues in our community. I want to move these things. If it's a administrative, choke points and stuff like that, I want to remove those barriers and move on these things and execute them to get these different things, these different nuisance properties out of the way. So I haven't connected with her as well, just because of all the other things I've been doing for the last 3.5 weeks. But it is on my goal as well to make sure that I hear her through that. And again, my commitment to them is to ensuring that whatever I can do to make sure they can encourage them to do their jobs better, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. So you haven't met with them either. What have you met with the Office of Community Health and Safety?
So I met with Laura a couple times, and she's great, first of all, with ideas. And again, in our talks, we have not strategized on moving forward, but what we have done is start having some preliminary talks about what that office does. And so that council was very clear that I didn't come in with a broad, aspect of all these different strategies. That's just not my leadership style to do that. I come in and I said when I meet with individuals, and that's why I want to spend the time, I come in with a very big ears and a small mouth. I really want to hear what's happening in those places. And I'm using that as an analogy because when I can see, if I'm called into leadership, I want to know what we do and what we need to do and what they're doing well. And if there are problems that I could resolve that would make them better, that's what I want to work alongside them to do. So what Laura and I have talked about was some mutual interests and some things. I do feel like from my talks and some of the things that I've learned and just what I'm looking for down the line for some vision for some of these efforts, I think there's some capacity for us to do some things and expand upon those. But I haven't sat down to start strategizing it. I'm forming teams. We're having meetings. Some of the things like one of the priorities I said, just as an example, one of the priorities that I brought forward was the issues of youth and the youth surge, I called it. I came in on day 3 and said, we have a youth surge problem, but what I wanted to do is to make sure that we provide an opportunity for youth to participate. We want healthy opportunities for our youth to participate, but when we see some of these other issues, how are we going to address it from a preventative, from a proactive stance, and not having our law enforcement only going around chasing around these kids around these different places. Part of that, to your question, is I've asked Laura, or in that office, is there ways that they can be participating, trying to be more creative, thinking through. And so my commitment is just bringing members to the team to help me to think. I know what I do well. I need to have members around me that have skill sets and thoughts and stuff like that are different from mine so we can create opportunities to be able to address some things.
Okay. So I understand, you've only been here since the O'Connor administration has taken office. Have you had the opportunity to meet with fire?
I'll meet with the chiefs. I met with the fire union. I met with all the unions and the chiefs. I meet with them regularly. So I started those regular meetings, just understanding again, trying to understand what their vision is and kind of sharing back and forth. So I've had some of those meetings.
What are the challenges that we're seeing right now in the Fire Bureau, and what are your vision to kind of address those?
Yeah, so I think we have the issue with the battalion chiefs is an issue. I think our chiefs are bearing responsibility and load because there was some changes, I'm understanding, with the position of battalion chief and not having that level of supervision. So I've heard that directly from them. Hopefully we can move through a process so that they can even out that load of responsibility. I've also heard too, some of these issues that because we don't have that level of supervision there too, there are some other things like I've heard from our PIOs and working with them. So hearing their situation about that was one that I parked and said, okay, how do we address that? And that may be, there's some contractual things and stuff like that, but I do want to try to figure out how we de-stress some of this process so we're not missing things. I have full confidence in what I know of, Chief Jones and the other assistant chiefs. I have full confidence based off of what they expressed, but I'm asking them my support for them. Another thing is they expressed to me some of the community, their CARES program, they mentioned to me that they would like to bolster that. As I listened to their CARES program, this is one of those community approaches that I embrace as well. So I want to figure out ways that I can help them along with that as well. So didn't hear a lot of the equipment, our facilities. This is what I'm hearing from our public safety broadly, but these are major issues that points to what the chief said about morale. That's where you come in about this can impact morale across different bureaus and, where there are places to work and, even getting simple facility requests, tracking those facility requests of a leaky faucet and stuff and I know I sound like I'm minor stuff, but this may not be so minor to a person that has to work in those spaces. Talk to the fire unit. they expressed to me that their whole desire to make sure that, we're attractive, that, they want to be a diverse fire department, and it really was energizing to hear them say that they want to work together to make sure that we can find ways to attract other candidates to be a more diverse fire bureau. But one of the challenges we have is we don't have bathrooms that would support that. And so where my role is to start thinking through these and starting to have some opportunities, what's going to come to this table is we look at, that's how we support them, is that these are the things that matter to them, that I need to raise the alarm on these things that are pertinent and make sure that we have a process to try to get them what they need so that they don't have the issues before them.
Yeah, I mean, we always hear, fire, specifically fire and EMS, they don't just work in these facilities, they live in them.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask the same question with EMS. Have you had the opportunity to meet with the EMS chief?
Yes.
And what are the challenges that you see there, and what are the struggles you see there?
Well, one was so again, vehicles being one of those issues, but also too that there was an issue. I mean, a bigger issue about what Chief Lando said for his department about wellness, and I think we got some of our personnel numbers up where they weren't required. A lot of forcing overtime and cancellation of past days and stuff like that because you have to fill shifts. I think they've resolved that, and kudos to Chief Gilchrist and her team too with the EMT program, and that's kind of a mentoring aspect. So kudos to those efforts. But I think that's one area that was addressed. I want to make sure that it doesn't become another issue. But the biggest one I think right now is just in their vehicles, and that's being a bigger one, that they can't have the vehicles to be able to respond. And so we're moving towards that as well. You all have done things to help us along with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Freedom House program is one of the, I think, shining stars of the city, and something that we should fully celebrate how great that's worked to get our EMT numbers up. We still do have a medic problem, and that continues to be a challenge here. But regardless, again, I'm more interested in kind of hearing your thoughts on how your vision's going as you're embracing this role here. Have you met with animal control?
I have. I met with the leadership. Actually, they had a death in their ranks not too long ago, right after leaving work. I personally went down there. They'd never met me before. Thought it was important for me. I went down there to be with them, and I'm glad I did that. I walked down there and I told them I didn't know their colleague. I didn't even know any of them, but I didn't want them to be processing this alone. So I stood with them, spent some time with them, let them know it wasn't just a drop in, just say, hey, we're sorry, and leave out. I wanted to spend some time, give them some assurances. And for as much as I was able, I told the supervisor at the time that I fully support whatever he needs to do to care for them, whatever we needed to do because of its impact. So I met with them, and I shared some good stories as well. I mean, back when I was in SWAT, back in the day when animal control went out of service, they put us in service. I greatly appreciate animal control and what they do because I did not like doing those animal calls whatsoever. It's not for me. So I thank them. I was very, 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 very grateful for what they do. So just to let you know, I connected with them, and it's not one-offs for me, Council Member Sheldon. As much as I'm able, I tell the staff, as much as I'm able, I want to be in community, connecting with those bureaus and those as much as I can with the personnel. I know it's a lot. I have responsibilities, but as much as I can, I want to be as tangible and accessible, and that's what I look forward to doing.
Okay. And I just want to ask, you mentioned, this wasn't one of my original questions, but you mentioned your teaching responsibilities. What kind of time commitment is that? Yeah,
so I have an in-person class on Thursdays, and I do two online classes that's asynchronous. That's the spring and the fall. The spring and the fall is the in-person class. And so I do those two, nothing in the summer, and I do nothing, just one class that I'm in person and two asynchronous classes that I I built. So they run kind of automatic on their own. There's not much input on my part with those, except some grading responsibilities and stuff.
Well, so what kind of hours are we talking?
It's 2.5 hours
Okay.
on a Thursday.
Okay. Thank you. All right. If I can move to Acting Chief Lando here, I wanted to. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about recruitment, and there have been lots of efforts made in recruitment over the last couple years here. One of the things that I'm kind of worried about as you're talking about your interest in recruitment is that we are going to throw out some of the strides that we've made previously. So we've invested pretty heavily in having officers doing recruitment. They have a car. There's apparently a very cool video that is being produced. I want to make sure that your efforts are to build on those and not to replace those. I think one of the big mistakes that we can make in a new administration is throwing out everything that was done before, if it's working well. Have you had the opportunity to engage with those?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I am a big believer in the officers that are out there every day doing the work, being part of the recruitment efforts. A lot of times you'll see agencies that have like a recruitment unit, and that unit, and nothing against those officers, but that unit, that's all they do. And so I love the fact that we actually have officers that are out there doing the work that can speak firsthand to that. I think that's when, if someone's interested potentially in a career in law enforcement, they want to talk to someone that's out there every day answering the calls, doing the work. So, yeah, 100%. I've seen the video, really love it. We made a few edits, and now we're just waiting on. I think we have to talk through a couple administrative things before we can get that released and put out. But I'm very appreciative of the work that went into that. I had nothing to do with it. It was finished by the time I got here. But I watched the video and I thought, I want to apply. Oh, wait a minute. I work there. So it's one of the best recruitment videos I've seen. And I think for me, it's just constantly looking for new and innovative ways to do that recruitment. For instance, there's one thing now, and some people have mixed feelings on it, but we have the ability to geofence areas. So if we find out that there's like a police department right now, that whether they're doing layoffs or whether the officers don't feel supported, and we expect those officers to be leaving the department, looking for work elsewhere, we have the ability to do social media campaigns where we actually geofence an area, and if we're going to spend money doing that, let's make it a targeted effort, and we can geofence that area and push the Pittsburgh police out, push that video out to potential candidates. So we're not just kind of wasting our money doing these random media blitzes. I think someone talked about job fairs. The statistics show that job fairs really don't do much. People come, they get free handouts and fun stuff. We don't see a lot of applications. So I think for me, partnering with institutions of, I say higher learning, I mean partnering with high schools and with colleges, I think is also important. So we can get our officers in there to start kind of making regular visits, building relationships. But these like one-off job fairs, they don't seem to be hitting the mark. But to your earlier point about like throwing out what's been done, that's something there's a question I faced when I left here to go to Maryland, and I try to be very, very intentional about, I think I might have some good ideas, but other people might have already had really good ideas, and I want to be respectful of those ideas, so we're not just coming in and saying, well, we're going to just throw away everything that's happening and start fresh. So you have my word that that's not going to happen.
And kind of on the same vein, you obviously have a lot of familiarity with the department, but in your time here since you became acting chief, what are some of the things that you've learned from command staff, just in this month period here, that maybe made you think differently about how you want to run the department?
So I'll tell you that, in all honesty, I was pleasantly surprised to see how much really thoughtful and good work has been going on behind the scenes. I'll tell you, it was conveyed to me by some individuals like, boy, when you get in there, you're inheriting a mess and you're just gonna have to start all over. That's not the case. I meet on an almost daily basis with the commanders. We have a weekly meeting with the chiefs specifically, where I try to stay closely in touch with all of the work that's going on. Are you familiar with OSAR? Mm-hmm. So I had my initial meeting with OSAR to find out the projects that they're working on. We actually just set a monthly recurring meeting so I can go over to OSAR and stay briefed on what they're doing. I've been really impressed with like the amount of work that's going on that the public, I don't think, has any idea. Innovative things, whether it's new technology, review of policies and procedures and the way we're doing things. I've been very impressed with this command staff and how collaborative they are with each other. I know we didn't have a chance to work together, prior, so I'm not sure how familiar you are, but I remember a time when that wasn't always the case. And I do remember a time where there was some clashing and some infighting. No, I'm not going to comment on that or no judgment on that. But when I came into this role a month ago, and as we go around the room, we talk about, okay, what's everyone working on right now? Just the way it's like, hey, I'm working on this, but so-and-so is helping me. We have a meeting next week. We're going to meet with our community partners. And I just sat back and I thought, they have it together. And so I think it's been very refreshing to see. And I think we need to publicize that more because the community needs to know that collaborative work is going on.
So one of the things that came up a lot in the Zone 3 public safety meeting, and this is I don't think this is a fault of yours by any means, but a lot of the answers to a lot of questions were, you need to talk to your commander, talk to your command staff. And I'm always fearful of a situation where we've got folks in conference rooms on Grant Street making decisions without talking to people that are actually boots on the ground, and I just want to reiterate how important it is to make sure that, these commanders are the ones that are dealing with the problem of, parking in front of Miss Judy's house and, the abandoned cars that we have in Mount Oliver, and that we're not making decisions in police headquarters that sound like they work but aren't actually understanding and respectful of the officers that are actually doing the job. And I think that's a problem in all institutions. There's another major department that we're dealing with pretty closely right now that I think that is some of an issue with as we go through the snow removal. But I do want to make sure that's something that is always brought to the forefront, that these commanders, they and the officers underneath them do have a lot more impact on day-to-day life than you or anyone else that would be over in the north side. And I want to make sure that that's something that's always brought to the forefront and always something that's in the front of your mind.
Yeah, I actually think that's exactly why I made those comments in the Zone 3 meeting, is people were asking me questions about zone-based issues. And for me, it's, well, the zone commanders and their officers are the ones that are addressing those issues. So I didn't feel like I didn't want to take away from the commander and the sergeant and the lieutenant that were in the room, because they're the ones that are actually handling those issues every day. So for me to say, yes, this is what I will do, well, the people that are in the room doing the work are the ones there. And that is why I referred to them, because I felt it would be almost disrespectful for me to say, well, this is my plan on how we would address that, when in fact, your commander, who I know is outstanding and a hard worker, is actually doing that work. And I wanted the community to say, that's your resource right there, not me. I don't set the policy in the zones about how we're going to do speed enforcement at 7 a.m. on this particular street. That would be up to the zone commander. So that's exactly why I made those comments. And then the other thing, just to your comment about giving people a voice, that's the whole reason why I'm creating the Employee Advisory Committee, because I want select, and when I say select, it's going to be, we're probably going to have about 30 people from across the entire city, but officers and staff that are out on the street every day, not people sitting in headquarters. And they're going to be the ones that meet on a monthly basis with the chiefs, so we can hear directly from them So when we say, hey, this issue came up, we can hear their ideas on how to address it. And for me, and I think most officers that you would talk to would probably tell you that I care very much about how they operate and their wellness out in the street, and how they handle business. And so this is a chance for me to give them that voice, so I can, when we make those policy decisions, we're making it, they're informed decisions.
Well, now I've got a couple, just two questions for both of you. I want to talk about your experience, your views, and what your plans are with the ShotSpotter system.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
No. So I was in Zone 5 when they rolled out ShotSpotter. I was the commander there, so I had the ability to be one of the first ones to have exposure to the system. I know that there has been discussion about some controversy over ShotSpotter and whether it causes over-policing in an area. I'll be honest, I don't see it that way. For me, my experience with ShotSpotter over the years has been that we are getting to emergency situations quicker, and we are finding people that are potentially critically injured and getting them help much quicker. And just, I'll give you one example anecdotally. We were dispatched to an address in Homewood a couple years ago for shots fired. The officers got there. They did not see anything. They looked all around. They said, we're not finding anything. You can clear us. Well, ShotSpotter, the dispatch came over and said, hey, we have a ShotSpotter notification. You're in the wrong area. The red dot, because on the map on ShotSpotter, it's extremely precise. The red dot is showing in the backyard of this house at this location. The officers went around the block to the backyard, and they found someone critically injured who was bleeding. I think about that all the time, because those officers, and through no fault of their own, they did a diligent search, but all they had was a call for shots fired. They would have got back in their cars, called back in service, while someone bled to death. And so for me, ShotSpotter, I think, is an important tool to get help to people quicker. I haven't seen statistics that show that it causes any more citations or arrests or over-policing. It is a very technology-driven tool that says to someone, like, a gun was fired right here. You need to go there. And so I guess I'm certainly open to the conversation if there is controversy, but in my experience with it, I've seen us getting to victims faster and getting people help, or finding people that are shooting those guns and getting them in custody before they can hurt someone else.
I was simply going to say, when I was going to lay it out, I have limited amount of experience with ShotSpotter. It wasn't used when I was working. I do know, stepping into this is some of the conversations I started having some with my staff, just so I would get familiar with that, because I know that we may need to come and to analyze its use and to see its efficacy and stuff like that. So I just want to assure you, just by mentioning that is something that we have already discussed with my direct teams, because I knew it was on the forefront. I need to get more familiar with it.
Thank you. And the last question I have, and I thank my colleagues for allowing me a good bit of time here, but I just want to ask what your intentions are, how you plan to communicate and work with us as council members.
I've shared, I think, with many of you all, that there's I view my role with 5 different levels of responsibility, and I'll just share them publicly. I lump my family to myself in one. That's one of my responsibilities on how I do my job and what I do with my job. Personal responsibility to my family. A responsibility to this administration. I'm extremely honored that Mayor O'Connor selected me. He could have selected anyone. And he selected me. So this administration, I have a responsibility that I carry the weight of this responsibility and its duties, and I work effectively. To the community, I have a responsibility to the citizenry. I think you hear that common theme. To my public safety servants, I have a responsibility to them. And I didn't leave it lastly, but it is important, to my elected officials, to those that govern us. I have a commitment and a responsibility to you all. So those are my 5 levels of responsibility.
Just as I said before, I'm a big believer in open and honest communication. I think for me, I guess it would be helpful for me to learn, and this happened, in Frederick, to learn how each of the council members would like to be interacted, with. For instance, notifications on major, certain events, major events in your areas. I know kind of everyone operates a little bit differently, so there's a bit of a learning curve. And I'll just be honest. Councilwoman Gross texted me last week and said, "Hey, were you going to notify me on this incident that happened?" And on my mind, I was thinking, "Oh, well, if I was the zone commander, I would." But I guess I don't know if as the chief, if I would be making that notification. So there's a little bit of a learning curve. But for me, just being open, honest, and available, I think is really important. And I would hope, as I've gotten all of your calls and text messages over the past few weeks, that you have found that I have been very, very responsive. And then the last thing is, when we create the Chiefs Community Advisory Board, which is something we hope to have up and running by about March or April, we want to be very thoughtful and intentional about the residents from around the city that we select to sit on the board. But when we did this in Frederick, council members were always invited to those sessions so they could be a part of that experience, and that they could weigh in with their thoughts, and they could see what we were doing to work with the community as well. So those are all things that I would carry on here as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Salonetra.
Most of my questions center around, excuse me, youth crime and youth engagement. For example, the quality of life, when you call quality of life issues, when I have residents in my neighborhood that are more afraid of the children than they are anybody else, that's an issue for me. And I don't see where we engage enough with our children and let them know that being a paramedic, being a police officer, being a fireman is a viable option for them, and that it's a career that you can build a life on and raise a family on. I'd like to see what you feel you could do to really, like, middle school and up, not just high school, because a lot of times high school, they're, middle school, we want to catch these kids when they're young and give them direction. But I kind of wanted you to expand on what you thought you could do for them to get them involved career-wise, for what we offer here in the city, and what can we do to bring down the tension.
I think, I touched on earlier the progress we saw just in the program we implemented out in Zone 5. And so I would love to see us be able to build a robust program that we could roll out citywide to engage with youth. I think one of the drawbacks to being separate from the school police is that we miss out, I think, on that opportunity to build relationships with the kids in the school. I compare that, again, to my last 5 years in Frederick, where we had officers in our schools that were Frederick police officers, and they were working on programs to build relationships, engage the kids in a positive way. During the pandemic, these officers knew who the kids were that were at risk for whether there were domestic issues at home, mental health issues, and these officers during the pandemic were going to their houses to check on the kids and make sure that they had the resources they need. So there's a gap there. We don't have that because we're not in the schools on a daily basis. And again, it goes back to the staffing issue. Once we're able to get back to a place where we can do those things, I would love to work on a program where and I know there's other things in the work that I'm sure the director can touch on, but I would love to work on building a pipeline to becoming a police officer. But even if someone has no interest in becoming a police officer, the relationships are still important because they're still going to be residents of the city and engaging with the police. So youth outreach and I'm still a big brother with Big Brothers Big Sisters. So youth outreach is something that's particularly important to me. I've been trying to get the kid to join the police department. He does not want to do that. But again, I don't want to make promises that I can't live up to, because it does come down to staffing. And I, as the chief, have to say, okay, with the staffing we do have the ability, or we don't have the ability to do these new things, these new programs. And I don't want to overburden the officers or overburden the department until we get to a place where we are able to implement new programs. But for me, the youth outreach is a huge priority.
Definitely.
Councilmember Sheldon, I am actively engaged. I think you heard me say that was one of my priorities. If I seem like I'm saying all these priorities, they're not that many, but this is one of, that I mentioned a youth surge, but in a healthy way. I left a meeting coming here, starting some of those conversations from people who were in and involved with, the downtown partnership about youth and stuff like that. I've tasked my team to start thinking forward. I gave some objectives that I would like to accomplish by bringing interested parties together to help me think through what this whole youth approach is going to be, and to dovetail off of that, what are opportunities for youth engagement. I don't want to imply that I want to have this very firm approach to our youth. I want to have an engagement that embraces our youth. They're part of our communities, but also have accountability of our youth that participate in ways. So I think that's going to come with, being creative. I want to tap I think there's an unrealized potential in our communities. And I'm envisioning networking in the way that is not always with an organization looking for open purse strings. Like, they currently do stuff. And how can we network them in such a way that gets them to be interconnected, that we can figure out on a broader scale, like, what are you doing to engage with our youth? How can we participate with you and join hands with you, and we be able to go on a journey as they're doing certain things? So I want to figure that out in all of our communities. You may know of some. And I want to be able to attach some of these components with our public safety sector so that we have these opportunities. I think that'll grow some opportunities to be in engagement. But also that they get to see and real-time feel, be able to have tangible opportunities to meet with some of our public safety servants. Secondarily, Pittsburgh Public Schools has a career track. I think it's at Westinghouse High School with public safety. I had conversations with them before me taking this post about how University of Pittsburgh could have done some things, but I'm saying I'm carrying that forward. Like, if they have, a public safety a program, what are we doing to help to come alongside that so we can grow that interest? And where are there other opportunities that we can grow that as well? So that's what I want to do. I do think that we have to have an approach that embraces, how we're going to have a response to some of the things and the challenges we have with some of our youth. But I think our youth want a place to go. It's one of the things that Mayor O'Connor has said, talking about how we're going to engage our youth in very healthy ways. And I want to come right alongside that to help think creatively how we're going to do that across the city. So I look to you all too to give some encouragement on how we can do this. Let me be a participant in your own districts to say, with your own creative ideas, and where we can come alongside in public safety to join you.
I think most of the questions that I had written down, everybody asked already. So I thank you both for coming today, and I thank you both for wanting to serve here in the city of Pittsburgh. And and I know how much you love our West End. So yeah, so thank you both.
Thank you, Councilman Warwick.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good.
You ready? Yeah, so anyway, yes, thank you for being here. And, and I appreciate all the meetings that we've had so far. So, I have quite a few questions, so I'm just going to go through them, the first two questions, are around guns and cars, right? I feel like the biggest threat to our youth here in Pittsburgh are guns and cars. Right? That is what if parents are worried about their kids going outside, that is what they're worried about, right? Either that their kids might get shot or their kids might get hit by a car. So for me, that is like the top public safety issue across the board, as a parent and, as just hearing from my constituents. So just to talk initially just about, And by the way, Chief Lando, I have right here the packet that you gave me of, with all the work that you've been, so I'm very encouraged, right, by the work that you've done in the past and your interest in continuing that kind of community engagement. So, we have seen a remarkable drop in gun violence, right? And there's been a lot of talk about it in the media. Yes, it has been nationwide, but it has also been particularly steep here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. I think one thing that is left out of a lot of the media coverage around this drop in gun violence is that these violence prevention, violence interruption, community engagement programs aren't just happening in Pittsburgh, right? This isn't something that it's happening around the country. And that is why we are seeing, right, like after the spike, the post-pandemic, like the pandemic spike, lots of cities around the country have put these programs in place, including Pittsburgh, and they've been successful. I guess I'm curious to hear how, have you had conversations, with our Safe Passages team, with our REACH team? What are the conversations you've had so far?
Perfect timing.
And all of our, community groups that are working with Stop the Violence funding, et cetera, et cetera.
Sorry, perfect timing as Reverend Grayson walked in right behind you with his REACH jacket on as you were. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, right. Yeah, you say REACH and the door opened and Reverend Grayson walked in, so excellent timing. No, I mean, listen, I think the common theme for me today has been partnerships with the police department. We can't do it all by ourselves. And I was so happy to see and impressed to see groups like AIM and REACH and Safe Passages and all these groups that are out there, and they want to help, and they do work that we just can't do as a police department. And that's nothing against our officers, but these ladies and gentlemen have already established relationships in the community. So if we're trying to reach out to someone that we think is at risk, and they're like, I don't want to talk to you, and then Reverend Grayson shows up on scene, and they're like, I'll talk to him. That's a huge, we call it a force multiplier. It helps us hugely. So, and you're right, we're seeing these in cities all over the country, and I think that's why we're seeing that national decrease. And so that's something that I am heartened to see and very committed to supporting, making sure that, I would say the only thing where I've heard, and this is nothing at all against any of the providers, but if anything I see there's an opportunity to improve, it's some of the more coordination during certain times in certain areas where, it's conveyed to me at a downtown meeting that, hey, sometimes like all of our resources are out at a certain time, and at other times we're not seeing anyone out. So if we could maybe all just get more on the same page so there's no gaps in coverage. So I say that because I see my role as supporting that and figuring out just how to make us all work together cohesively. But I truly believe that that these groups working collaboratively with the police are the reason why we're seeing these drops, and we cannot take our foot off the gas now.
My statement is very simple. Like I've said throughout this whole day and time we've been being interviewed, but I said in our meetings, like my desire is to preserve what works well, and understand that, and this is part of what's working well. I've had some opportunities to meet some of these groups. I mean, they fall under, some of these fall under my responsibility. I do want to know, like, are all groups accountable? There are some groups that I know of that are doing great work. I want to make sure everybody's doing the work we're expecting. I think that's what you would hold me responsible for, but I don't see any need to come in and make drastic changes to the things that are working well. These contribute to the health and vitality of our communities, and I seek to preserve them.
Yeah, and so, and just to sort of continue on this topic, so one area that is of concern for me is that, we talk a lot about youth and educating the youth and getting the youth to come and, understand who we are better, right? I do think it's important to be clear that when we are having these conversations about youth, we're talking about Black youth in Pittsburgh for the most part. Of course, you know, the vast majority of young people in the former Schumann, now Highland, or I can't remember the new name, I think like some 86% are Black youth. And there's actually a good article in the Atlantic recently. There is this culture of pushing young people, teens, out of our public spaces, right? Like our efforts are geared towards getting our kids out, getting them elsewhere. And I hear this in the conversations, right? Whether it be around downtown or whether it be around South Side or around Squirrel Hill or whatever, is that the kids are in our areas, right? Whether it's our business districts or our neighborhoods, and they're causing problems. We got to get them out of there. We got to get them into programs, or we got to get them, right? So what I would like to see more of, and by the way, I'll go. So what I would like to see more of, in addition to this kind of push to educate them and to, you know what I mean, like change their behavior or whatnot, is to also educate the rest of our community, whether that be our business owners, whether that be folks in our communities, right? To say, look, you know, our young people get to be here too, right? Our young people get to live here too. They are Pittsburghers too. And maybe that means making and I get, right? Teens are tough, right? Like I've got, you know, 2 13-year-olds at home, right? Like kids can be annoying and they can be loud and they can be all these things, right? But this sort of demonization of our young people here in the city concerns me. And I think that we can do more to, in addition to sort of getting them to come over the bridge this way to us, is to also get, you know, business owners, whoever it may be, community folks, to cross the bridge over to them and make those connections, right? So if it's not just getting, and I mean, one thing that kind of struck me, and this is but how you said before, when you were a patrol officer and then you became a commander, and as the commander, you went into the community and were like, wow, like you hadn't realized before the fear of police officers in the community in Zone 5. And to me, that feels like an education and training issue, right? Because violence against the Black community by police is a core part of our history, right? And that's something that every officer should understand and be aware of, right? And will help in the engagement with community members, right? I don't know if you have, and another thing too on this, and I wanna, because I'm a transit person, right? And when we're talking about these issues especially with our Safe Passages program, we really need, and this is obviously a county issue and a PRT issue, but we need better collaboration with PRT, because the reality is our kids have to get to and from school, right? They have to get to and from work. And we do not have transportation, adequate transportation for them, right? And that is not their fault. So when you have, for example, in my district, right, in Squirrel Hill, you have 200 kids come out of Alderdice, and they've got this tiny little bus stop, right? But you know what I mean? Right next to a Starbucks, and like, and somehow like it's the kid, you know, and Starbucks is trying to manage all these kids, and the kid, you know, we need help navigating that, but it is also the infrastructure that we've created is just not adequate to get our kids around town, you know? Anyway, I'll let you comment before.
No, well, I mean, on the as far as PRT goes, I definitely agree. We have to have conversations surrounding that, because in a number of things that have come up recently, my response has been, well, have we been able to just maybe like look at moving the bus stop? That could potentially address some of the issues. So I agree that whether we come up with some sort of a working group or some committee, and we loop all of our partners in to include transit, I think is important. And also, I don't, I agree with what you said, and I think about, the officers that are out there every day getting called to things that sometimes just aren't police matters, and it puts everyone in a tense spot, right? Because if these are situations where kids aren't breaking the law, where they're just being kids, then that puts them on the defensive, and it also puts our officers in a difficult spot, because someone's picking up the phone and calling 911 and saying, I need the police here. We're obligated to go. And then we get there and we're like, well, in this case, these are kids being kids, and there's not much we can do. And so I think that education piece is very important, because I think it helps everyone. It helps the kids not have to be viewed a certain way, and it also helps us from being called to situations unnecessarily where there's not a lot we can do. So I don't have the answer here today, but I can tell you that I appreciate the comments and I agree with you, because I can tell you that if you ask any police officer, like, what's the thing that you enjoy dealing with the least, they say getting called to large groups of kids, because they know a lot of times someone feels unsafe, picks up the phone and expects the police to solve the problem, and oftentimes there's just not a lot we can do. So I think it is something we need to work on.
I'll just simply add, Councilmember Warwick, I think you hear me throughout answering some of these questions, the importance of it, and but also that I was very heartened when I went to the meeting right before here, because I heard the voices that were at that table, Downtown Partnership and some of the other organizations that were there, that they want participation of the youth, but how do we do that in a very healthy way? And that's where I want to join those voices to say, I told them my experience. Like, we used to have back in the day, those that would be familiar, they had that weekend bus pass, that 4 people can get on one bus pass. And we used to hop on the PRT, wasn't called that then, Port Authority, and we would fly downtown, right? We did that. And that was our activity when I was youth. And so what happens now, though, I do need to, I want to be kind of specific, that what are the true problems and not the made up ones? Just the presence of youth does not present the problem, but when certain behavior hits to a certain thing, what is our response? So I want them to participate, and how do we set up an atmosphere that allows them to participate in the activities or what's happening in and around? That's a yes. And so when I bring to that conversation, if that's how we're all charting together, like, not removing them, you're talking about the educational piece, but how can they be responsible and participating? And kids are going to be kids. I think a loud child is not raising for alarm, but we also need to be able to define when certain activity hits a certain point. Mm-hmm. I don't think our youth need to be running around Southside at certain hours of the day. Why are there youth in the Southside? So I would never engage or embrace, well, they need to be here. No, they shouldn't be in those spaces. And how do we make sure that at certain times that those youth aren't being in those? It's just not a place for them. So I think there's balance. Where's the spaces that they can participate? How we expect them to participate, but not always. Like, I don't like to see our first responders running after scores of kids, but I don't want a sentiment that says they're not allowed or not part. They are part of our community.
So, and just this idea of because it does take a certain amount of, you need a certain know-how in dealing with kids, right? Whether you're a teacher or whatever, folks who don't engage with kids often don't know how to do, whether it's a toddler or like whatever age group, or a middle schooler or a high schooler, right? Like you learn how to engage with kids. I always find the gold standard, here in Pittsburgh anyway, is in our libraries, right? Like, our libraries are a place where anyone can go. And I have libraries across my district in all types of neighborhoods, and I never get complaints about the youth from the libraries. I really never do. And it's a place where people can go, anyone can go, right? Where they are welcome, they, there's space for them, and where the staff, know how to deal with the youth, right? They like kids and they engage with kids. And so I don't know what the libraries are doing, but whether our community engagements, whether it's through OCHS or whatnot, if we could get some kind of the same way that we do, the same way that we offer trainings for like dealing with our unhoused or dealing with folks who are experiencing an overdose crisis or something like that, if we could get a training that we can offer to business owners about, hey, how to engage, how better to engage with youth so that you have a better relationship going in, so that we're not starting, right, foot in the door with this like antagonistic feeling between our business owners. I think that might be something to try, and I don't think something that we've done to date. Yeah, so, okay, so moving on to my next question, Vision Zero, right? Councilman Strasburger touched on it a bit. We have this Vision Zero task force. It has been very effective. Vision Zero, is the goal of zero traffic deaths on our street. And it is infrastructure, enforcement, and education, right? And so obviously infrastructure, that's DOMI, that's our traffic calming. Enforcement, that's the Bureau. Commander Ripple has been great with, I know he's got limited cycles, but, been very helpful in doing that kind of spot enforcement. We have some issues with our state partners of not being able to use some of the tools, like, automated tools that exist. Unfortunately, I know that that's work that we can do as council members. But it is a wildly popular program. First of all, if you look, well, I would say 311. So it's probably snow is on the top of the 311 list at the moment. But, generally it is speed, right? It's traffic calming, people, wanting cars to drive safer in their communities. And it's also a key to our growth. Like 20% of Pittsburghers roughly don't own a car. And when we have folks who come here from places like the Bay Area, the tri-state area, Chicago, they do not want to have to get in their car to go a mile and a half to get to work. They want to be able to walk. They want to be able to bike. They want to be able to do all these things safely, right? And so that's where Vision Zero plays a big part in that. I'm glad to hear that you're both engaged on Vision Zero, but what I do want to ask is, because I do have some concerns, and this isn't just with police officers. I know we had, it's across the Public Safety Bureau. There seems to be some resistance among sort of the rank and file to this initiative, right? That council passed, that the city is engaged on, that is a major policy initiative for our city. So I was hoping if you could speak to that, how we can kind of bring win the hearts and minds of our boots on the ground across public safety.
I think, one of the things, and I'm trying to look at this from the officer's perspective and from officers that I've talked to, and please, I'm not making excuses, and as leadership, it's our job to, fix this if we need to fix it. But just from their perspective, I think officers have seen over the past several years a huge push for police to get out of the business of traffic enforcement because of some of the things that have happened in these cities. And so where certain elected officials in certain cities, they've basically did away with, traffic stops. And in one city, they're trying to make traffic enforcement the job of just of civilians. And so I think there is some level of confusion, I think, among the officers where they say, hey, 3, 4, 5 years ago, we're looking at all these things that we shouldn't be stopping people for anymore. Our elected leaders don't want us to do traffic enforcement, and now it's like the reverse. And I think that there's some apprehension on the part of the officers. They're like, do we do traffic enforcement? Don't we do it? If something really bad happens, is the finger gonna be pointing at us? You shouldn't have stopped that car for that reason. So I think that we owe it to the officers to, educate them on what this is, what the expectations are, and to also reinforce that they will be supported. And so that's from everything I've heard from talking to officers about traffic enforcement is you see nationally, officers across the country have pulled back significantly from some of the proactive work because they don't want to be the next national news story. And again, my job as the chief is to work with you and educate the officers on this is what Vision Zero is and this is what the expectations are. So I'm not saying that that mindset is okay or acceptable or we should, just carry on with it. But I just wanted you to hear from their perspective some of the hesitation to be really proactive about being out there doing traffic enforcement. Now, the motorcycles, that is their whole job. So that is why you see them out there so much. The motorcycles aren't out typically answering 911 calls. They're out to do traffic enforcement. But we do need to work to educate the officers and get them to a place where they're comfortable going out there and handling those Vision Zero type complaints.
So again, it's funny because this kind of comes back to the same thing, right? So, and I think probably I think I saw Reverend Burgess here earlier, but when council passed a resolution saying that we're not going to pull people over for broken taillights and things like that, right? Like that is about harassment by officers in Black communities, right? And there's a difference, right, between doing traffic stops for people who are running red lights or going around buses or whatever in the middle of the day at rush hour in school zones and all of this kind of thing, and pulling people over for a broken tail light at 2:00 in the morning on Frankstown Avenue, and then potentially having some kind of altercation, right, between the officers. So again, like this is what I mean when it comes back to and I don't blame officers, boots on the ground, for not making because I see, but it's our job, right? It's leadership's job to get that education and understanding out there, right?
Absolutely,
To understand the context, right? So that they can see that it's not, that it's two different things that we're trying to do. And then also with the Vision Zero, well, I'll let you respond to that.
No, I was kind of agreeing.
Yeah.
That it's our job. It's our job to say this is what the vision is, and this is the mission, and this is how we're going to carry it out. So I was just acknowledging that.
And I've had this conversation with Commander Ripple, right? And where, so for example, an officer will, someone will run a stop sign or whatever, and then the person will go and they'll contest it, and maybe the judge lets it go. But it really isn't about the punitive side. It's about changing the behavior, right? So even if you're pulling someone over and saying, hey, you ran that stop sign, and you don't even have to give them, right, if a warning or whatever, that feels like enough, right? At least at a first go, right? We're not trying to scare people. We're trying to change behavior.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, so I guess, Director Williams, so the other side of it, and this is also police, but I think overall with the Bureau, is sort of kind of an antagonism toward the traffic, toward the infrastructure, right, among the Bureau, and how can we again win the hearts and minds? How can we, because we are like the Vision Zero team and the DOMI team does work with leadership, around traffic calming measures to make sure that our public safety crews and vehicles can do their job. But there is nonetheless this sort of lore that, it's hampering their ability to sort of get to calls on time and whatnot. So
It has to be factual. You can't just suggest these things. And assurances, like if it's the will of the administration and it's the will of council through legislation, I champion those messages and will ensure that, like, you're not going to get a different communication out of me, different from, this is the will of council and the will of the administration. That's the message I champion, and hold those direct reports to me to ensure the same thing, which are my chiefs, and then hope that they would be distributing that down to the other leadership as well. So the one thing that I wouldn't want to offer, and I don't think this would be the case, I have a good working relationship with the chiefs as it stands, that when these things are expressed, that they'll champion those messages as well. And I think that's how we create the culture. But I think too, on the front end, if we're also bringing those concerns up, that if they're raising them, and I say if they're factual and they're discussed, and whether or not they hold water or not, but at least I bring these things from the different bureaus that say, well, this is a challenge if you do those traffic calming, this is a challenge. But if they're heard and we work those out and we find out they're not really factual, but at least we can communicate those things. They were raised. There's no basis for that, and this is why we're proceeding. But you're just not going to get a different message out of, well, you're not going to get it from me and to those that I'm responsible for. And I'm sure that I'm confident they'll champion the same messages.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the concern about ICE and any other, federal, potential law enforcement group coming into the city. I appreciate Councilwoman Strasburger raising the issue. So we've heard and we understand that Mayor O'Connor has committed to not cooperating with ICE. And I do, and I heard what you said about ICE operate, right? Like we're not able to intervene if ICE is, whatever, doing some type of immigration enforcement. I understand, but that we're not going to assist, right? Like we're not going to give data. We're not going to, I would like to see even that. I would like to see that clear and in writing, right, as a policy, both for our immigrant communities, right, so that they can know and be heartened that the city is, this is what we, but I do want to press a little further with that because of what we are seeing in Minneapolis and we've seen in Chicago and we've seen in other cities around the country. So I do want to stress here in Pittsburgh, we have families that are afraid to leave their houses, right? That are having groceries and such delivered to them by neighbors. We have community groups that have canceled cultural events like parades because because those would happen outside, and they're afraid that if folks participated in those events that they would be targeted by ICE. So that this is now, today, in Pittsburgh. And we have seen extreme force being used by ICE agents in these immigration, and I've seen videos. And when I say extreme force, extreme, right? Very disturbing videos. And this is here in Pittsburgh already. And then, of course, in Minneapolis, right, we have seen pepper spray and tear gas used on nonviolent protesters, used on people, exercising their right to record in a public space, right, like record law enforcement. We have seen ICE entering private homes and businesses without a judicial warrant. And then, of course, we have seen now two, I will call them executions, right, on camera, of ICE agents, of people, just working to protect their neighbors, right? Just out there trying to record, trying to protect their communities. So I think I'm going to ask you if and I get that we don't have this now, but in the same way, we know this is happening in Minneapolis. We are watching it happen. And we know that it could happen, and we know that ICE and the Department of Homeland Security have these astronomical budgets, right? They've got more money to continue to expand this than, I think than any other law enforcement agency in the country, to be honest. And just like we have a plan for the NFL draft, and just like we have, make plans for weather events and snow events, I think we need a plan for this. Residents are scared. I think we need a plan that involves the folks who are working with our immigrant communities, the folks who are organizing, protests, First Amendment activities, folks who are conducting trainings for neighbors on how to protect your neighbors and how to manage, right? We have community members who are organizing and coming up and teaching people how to, do all these things, like document what ICE is doing just in case it comes here. And I think that we as the city desperately need a plan, our public safety department, both on how we're going to deal with it, with our own public safety and specifically our police officers, right? Like how are they going to deal with these situations? And then that also that needs to be, and it needs to be communicated to the public with guidance so that we can ensure, because for me, the most important thing is no matter what happens, we want to keep people safe. We don't want to see what's happening in Minneapolis happen here in Pittsburgh. So we want to make sure that our law enforcement teams are equipped and trained and understand how we plan to respond as a city. So I'll let you both.
Well, first I'll say, we have the fair and unbiased policing policy here. So one of the things that I would commit to doing is to sitting down with our leadership team and the city attorney and having a discussion on just really reviewing the policy. I don't know that it's been updated in a while. Just reviewing the policy and make sure that it still reflects all of the things that I told you here today that are common practice currently. So policy-wise, I think that it definitely merits a review of the policy and revisions if appropriate. I also have no issue with coming up with a plan. I think that would be a larger conversation with city leadership and some of our community members that are affected by this. And so, again, I've always been one to take a collaborative approach, and I want to hear everyone's voices. So I have no issue with that. I just think that that's the police department's just like one spoke in that wheel, and I think that we need to get everyone on the same page as far as that goes. And I guess one other thing that I just always have in the back of my mind, and just since we're talking about it, is part of my concern about what we're seeing in Minneapolis now is that they've been so outspoken about it, and I think that now you're just seeing this massive influx of agents there. And so I'm trying to we're trying to handle things internally in the department, reviewing policies, making sure we're doing all the right things. I'm just hesitant to, I'm afraid that the more outspoken we are about this, the more attention we will potentially attract, because right now we are seeing those one-off issues with ICE agents. The last thing I want to see is 1,000 ICE agents descend upon Pittsburgh. And so I just think we should all be thoughtful about like how and where we're having those conversations, because the last thing I want is for someone to be like, in Pittsburgh, you're going to be our next Minneapolis. And so I just think that that's, just because we're having that conversation now, that's always something that weighs on me, is how much we're calling attention to, ourselves. So I agree with you. We need to look at the policy. We need to come up with a plan. And I also struggle with some of the things I've seen on the news recently.
I'll simply add to it. I mean, it's wise to think about this ahead of time, so I'm embracing that. But I think part of that whole development of plan is also informing constituents what they should do as well, and what's permissible and stuff like that, so we don't get to this escalating. Like, in certain, what is the expectation of those, and what are they lawfully allowed to do, and that doesn't cause an escalation or, inflaming this word. So I think part of that is just, we saw that in our communities, Citizens Police Review Board, along with some of the community groups, came up with a pamphlet to explain how that with interacting with the police, so that the people were informed. And I think it was well received. I think it was well received from law enforcement officials along with citizens. And so something similar, I would just add to that. People are genuinely outraged based off of what they see and alarmed, and I get it. And then they have a constitutional right to be able to verbalize or to be able to capture that. I just want them to do it in the right, appropriate way, so that they're not becoming part of the problem, which will complicate it, and then forcing our law enforcement to have to do some things just because they're too close or interfering or the suggestion of. And so if they understand that and explain that and give those parameters, I think in those scenarios, it would be welcomed with some of the stuff that we see, that we have people who are willing. I mean, absent having some of the footage we had of some of the incidents, like you heard the messaging that came out right after these incidents, but we actually had some evidence to kind of counter some of those narratives that were brought out initially. And that's because there were people who were there and around there who were filming. So I'm just suggesting
Right.
giving people some healthy ways to be able to do that.
Yeah, so, and I think, yeah, so I appreciate that, and I definitely think sooner rather than later is like having those engagements and putting that guidance out there. The more communication and the clearer it is about what, you know, what is safe, what isn't safe, what can, you know, how can our police force protect residents, you know, in situations like that? How can we best protect you? I will underscore that our police are not here to protect ICE. They're here to protect the residents of Pittsburgh, right? You know, so that we can keep the temperature down as much as possible, while also understanding that, you know, when we are seeing what we're seeing out in the streets, that people are going to respond, and that people are upset, and that is how historically in this country, you know, peaceful protest and political action and First Amendment action is how we make change, right? So that those actions are going to happen, inevitable, right? So with that, I want to move on. That's sort of related. I was in touch with some of our partners at our large universities, and so I wanted to ask you. This is sort of like threefold about relationships, again, between the Bureau, also public safety in general, but mostly the Bureau, you know, outreach with our universities, whether that be around large campus events, trainings around emergency situations, sort of like active shooter situations, sexual assault situations, and then, of course, immigration. We have a huge number of international students here in Pittsburgh, right? And then also community policing strategies that are specifically geared toward our student populations, right? Because, you know, when it comes to organizing around social justice issues, around, you know, whether it be global issues or local issues, students are often at the forefront. I think that the Bureau has done a good job. There were, of course, the protests over the past couple years. They got a little bit, you know, there was a little bit, but by and large, certainly compared to other cities, I think Pittsburgh did a very nice job. The Bureau did a good job of working with students and keeping everyone safe, right? That keeping everyone safe and allowing people to you know, exercise their First Amendment rights in an environment that is safe. So I'll let you speak to that. I don't know if you have spoken with our university partners, but any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll just say, so specifically law enforcement, I know we have really good working relationships with our universities. I'm actually having an event this evening with the chief of the Duquesne University Police. So law enforcement specific, we have great working relationships. As far as the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police and the universities itself, I definitely see opportunities there, both for training, resources. You know, I just think about different opportunities we have to collaborate with our universities. I think they're an underutilized resource. So I absolutely see opportunities there. With the police departments themselves, we do have regular conversations and have a really strong working relationship, but always opportunities to improve.
I'll just simply share my experience with being on the University of Pittsburgh with some of those things happening. Like internally, it was challenging for the university to navigate that too, to give the permissions for people to be able to raise the issues, but also balancing that against the, you know, public safety interests as well. And I think that's constant conversations. And I know of the city's involvement with the university to bring some of that to positive resolve. And I think that was a healthy way to approach that. And so just kind of piggybacking off what the chief said, like, if we have good established relationships, like one of the things that I would invite is that we, from the public safety sector, get to those university voices and those people in charge. Like, let's really collab to figure out what is their desires, and some of the stuff happens on their campuses and stuff by their permissions. I mean, and then that we come alongside that, but not cause a conflict at all, but trying to move it to a place where it supports and embraces the opportunities, but again, where we not start to get into thresholds where there might need to be some sort of, some countermeasures, meaning to the placement of people, stuff like that. What does that mean? So I think that's working in collaboration with the universities when those things happen. Sometimes they emerge and they're responding to those in real time. So we just got to be part of the early part of the conversation and see what the will is of the university so we can handle those well and not cause any conflict between them.
Yeah, great. Well, I know that our university partners will welcome that partnership and that collaboration. You know, these are just, I think it goes without saying, right? These are very trying times. There is just, the temperature is very high on lots of levels and lots of issues, you know, and whether it's global issues, national issues, you know, all the way down to local issues. Folks are divided, communities are divided, and everything that we can do to bridge those, you know, bridge those divides where we can, and make sure that people are, you know, kept safe where we can't. So with that in mind, and I'm going to move on. I have it called, I have this written here, Beyond the Academy, because I know, you know, obviously the Academy is a great place. Commander Flesky does a great job, right? The Academy is great. You've got all your new recruits right there. You can teach them all the stuff that you need to teach them, and right. But once they're out of the Academy and on, you know, is cascading, whether it's a new policy or a new, you know, whatever procedure or changes in the law, you know, so, you know, whether it's Vision Zero, I know we passed there's been a change to the way that we, you know, for sex workers, from, you know, an arrest to now it's just a citation, right? Similar to marijuana possession. How we deal with our unhoused population, right? Like, how do you deal, like, once it's been posted that there's no camping here and a tent comes up, how do we deal with that in a humane way? Again, with ICE, right? If we come up with a plan and a policy and an FAQ, how do we make sure that the boots on that is cascaded down to the, you know, or our various outreach groups? Like, how do we make sure that officers know about PAR and know about all the resources and such as they're out? I know it's hard, right? Because there's a lot out there. So
I mean, for me, it comes back to a point I touched on earlier, which is just having really strong leadership. And one of the things that I can't remember if I touched on it earlier, but one of the goals of mine is to start a leadership academy here. I was very happy to hear that when I arrived in town, that plan has already been in the works, and I believe it's next week or the week after that we are starting our first leadership academy. It's a 2-week session where we really drill down into some of the issues that deal with the day-to-day leadership and make sure that, you know, whatever the chief's vision is for the department is being accurately and adequately sent down, you know, through the ranks, and it's not, you know, we all remember, like, as rookie officers back in the day, when the chief would put out an order, and if the sergeant or the lieutenant didn't understand it, it would be conveyed in a way where it was like, yeah, chief's order came out. I guess this is what we have to do now, you know, and we all remember that, and like that's not leadership. And so I think if we're talking about all these things that we want to push out to the department and educate people on, that we have to rely on our sergeants and our lieutenants to make sure that they are taking ownership of those issues, and it's not just passing along the chief's message. So I'm very excited and happy to see what happens in our first leadership academy, and then the long-term goal for that is to bring in-house our own professional development coach that can work on some of the issues that have to do with leadership, but not so much in a policing sense. The class that I intend on bringing in is all about kind of like human behavior. So it's like leadership. It could be policing, it could be anything, but it's really like how to lead people, not just police officers. When we brought this program to Frederick, you could see like in the room, like a light bulb came on in a lot of people's heads, like, ooh, I've been managing. I haven't really been leading. And so I'm very excited to see what we're able to do in this next year. But I think it goes directly to your point, is there's a lot of stuff that we're implementing and a lot of stuff that we're doing, but we all have to be on the same page. And we do that through our sergeants and our lieutenants. And so just know that there is a plan in the works to better develop those leaders.
Great, that's
Yeah.
great. And then hopefully too, as part of that is a mechanism for if there are folks on the ground who don't understand, like, I don't get it, like, what
Right.
is up, or what am I supposed to do here, that they can also bring that back, or, or it's not working, like,
Yeah.
this just isn't, whatever
So-
came down is like messing us up in a big way.
To that point, so the feedback loop will definitely be the employee advisory committee. So as we push stuff out, I don't like to say down, but as we push stuff out, that employee advisory committee will be our feedback loop on, hey, great idea, but this is how it's operationally affecting us out in the street. So we will be able to close that loop. And then the other thing that I started doing, something that worked really well in Maryland, we just put out our first iteration of it, is a chief's update to the department. And the update includes, hey, here are the things I'm hearing from you. Here are the rumors going around. Here is an order that just came out last week, but here's the rationale behind the order. So almost like a newsletter, but it comes directly from me. So as we get the feedback and we know how it's affecting officers, we're then addressing that through that newsletter. So
Great.
I don't have any more to
Okay.
add, really.
And then that sort of brings to recruitment. We've talked a lot about recruitment. I do have one question just to add to that is, we've heard quite a bit about, obviously, difficulties recruiting. What is the status or perhaps the plan moving forward about hiring up civilians to do those jobs that don't require a fully trained armed officer, whatever. I don't know what all those roles are, but where we have an officer, who's like fully trained to do all these things, but in fact they could be out doing police work versus whatever.
yeah, so I just I actually appreciate you bringing that up, because I was, and again, not to. I keep referencing Frederick because I just spent 5 years there,
Sure,
so I realize two very different cities, but we had 150 police officers in Frederick and 55 civilian members of the department. We have 35 civilian members of the department in Pittsburgh with an authorized strength of 800. So we are clearly there's off balance. So what I would like to see, and I want to be very clear for any police officers that are listening, the goal is not to eliminate police officer positions. It is to enable those officers to staff the department where we can with civilians that don't need to carry badges and guns, so those officers can do police work. And so I stand by my assertion that I would love to see us get back up to 900, even if we get to 900. Things like evidence processing, crime scene processing. Now, I will tell you that our crime scene detectives are phenomenal, and I would put them up against anyone. And I'm not talking about replacing them. I'm talking about as they retire, because a number of them are eligible to retire. As they retire, looking at backfilling the new positions with crime scene technicians that are civilians that went to school for crime scene analysis, stuff like that. I see a lot of opportunities around the department for people that, and again, I don't think I can say it enough. I appreciate the work they're doing so much, and they're very good at it. But I think that if we want to be responsible about where we're putting our dollars, how we're allocating resources, we need to at least we need to start somewhere, and we need to start looking at the positions where, like you said, if you don't have to carry a badge and a gun, could we put someone else in there that costs the city less, and they're perhaps like that. They went to college and got their degree for that, and we don't have to bring them up and then train them to be in those positions. So a very valid conversation. I know that this budget year is pretty much, I think the window's kind of closed on that, but for next year, that's definitely a conversation for next budget year, looking where we can civilianize.
Great.
My only comment is that I got to have full faith and trust in my chiefs. And so if they bring this stuff up, I mean, I'm just going to support them. I'm there to help to support their decisions when they're moving these forward.
Yep, that makes sense.
I'm sorry, can I just add one?
Yeah,
There
please.
was one other thing that jumped into my head. You know, some of the stations right now, some of this, when I look at like low-hanging fruit, some of the stations right now, we know at night, on certain hours overnight, because of staffing, the stations are closed and we have those phones there. I don't see why we can't look at bringing in civilian desk clerks to man the stations overnight. We could keep the doors open, the lights on. If someone's having an emergency, the station's staffed, and you know that person might be able to take a police report, or if it's an actual emergency, they can call an officer in. But that's just one example of like, why do we need a police officer with a badge and gun to sit at that desk when we could have someone that's a civilian that's able to do that? So just another example that popped into my mind.
Yeah, great. I think that, so, I appreciate Councilman Sheldon bringing up all the other bureaus. This has been very police heavy. Yeah, thank you for that. Very glad that the EMS Academy is planning to continue strong. I know that there was some conversation about expanding that into paramedic training. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, or
Certainly.
Yeah.
That is one aspect. I had some initial conversations with Chief Gilchrist, and Chief Trim, I think, was there as well. And I don't know if I talked with the union, but also too, like, I want to look at opportunities. Do we do it? I love the idea of that, especially coming from our EMT ranks and those who want to go on to be medics. It's great, experientially, relationally. They got a knowledge of the city, so let's grow our people. If they want to move forward, because traditionally how people come to this, they get their training and come in. So I think it's a great on-ramp to advance careers. But I want to also look at what are our training opportunities with people who do it well. And so is the best opportunity for us to do our own academy, not removing the EMT academy? I think that's great. But the paramedic, moving that, is the best for us to have our own, or do we collaborate with entities that do that all the time? And is there an opportunity for us to be good collaborators with the university? So it's an exciting time to be navigating that, especially when there's interest from the department to do that. And so I'm encouraged that we'll move those forward to build our paramedics, our paramedic program, our paramedic opportunities. Also too, as it came to mind, we also are seeing some changes too, like nationally, and even our own department have paired up. We got an EMT and a paramedic sometimes. That's a useful way of sometimes addressing some of our needs on the street. So there may be other opportunities. We're looking at staffing and response-wise. I think they're adaptable our bureaus are adaptable by looking at what's best in serving our communities, and I just want to keep encouraging that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that one of the key pieces of that is, of course, being able to get paid while you're doing the training, right? Is that it being, and that's also just also in general, when we're doing community engagement and kind of identifying community partners who can help us, I think stipends are something to consider, right? Because then you get folks, it helps folks who might not otherwise have the time or resources to engage regularly on that type of thing to stay engaged.
I think one of the points you raised, Councilmember Warwick, is that I want to ensure too, like, it's hard to go to school, especially going to paramedic school, it's hard to learn that, and then you also have to work. Like, I would hope that we are providing opportunities, if we're going to allow them to do that, that they concentrate on their studies so that they can be effective. I've seen that personally where people are trying to obtain that level of certification and they have a responsibility back to their departments. I'm not saying city specific. I've seen it broadly based off of my own academic experience. So I'd be encouraged to try to create where we have the best opportunity. This is an investment of time and resources. We want to see them successful.
Great. I don't, and then of course the overarching for all of public safety, fleet, vehicles. We need those vehicles. So, yeah, I can promise you I will continue to advocate hard for that. And, at any rate, I think that's it for me. Thank you so much. I know it's been long, and I appreciate you both. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Bruce.
Thank you. Well, it's been 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours of questions and answers. I appreciate all the questions and answers from my colleagues. I just want to give a shout out to my staff who handed me 51 questions when I walked in the room. And we've been working on this for 2 weeks.
Hopefully we got through the
But I
majority
will
of them.
not cover all 51 questions because we have been sitting here for 3 hours. But so I also wanted to give them a shout out because in 2020, and I'm grateful for my colleagues who are asking the questions about civilianizing. There's a tiny chart on my tiny phone because this is the chart. Some colleagues will remember me quoting that we put together of our benchmark cities, and I'll be sure to send this to both of you. And so we think we were still kind of like safely separating, and I was sitting on this side of the table because it was like December of 2020 when we were in budget season. And so we were this was our COVID response, was sitting slightly more apart from each other, which is kind of sad. But it is, we typically compare ourselves to about 14 cities or so, places like Detroit and Cleveland and even Seattle and Austin, and some of those cities have gotten a lot bigger since we've been comparing ourselves to them for the last 20 years or so. But it was a chart from, I think, Governing Magazine, and it was staffing levels based on 2015. So some of our benchmark cities, for example, per 10,000 people, it had something like 18.6 officers on their force in Austin, but a total of 24.4 people in the police budget, right? So, there's a big difference in that ratio between how many officers are on the force versus total employment on the force. So you can see that the remainder would be like, 6 people per 10,000 were civilians on the police force. And at the time, this is 2015, there was 30 total police employees per 10,000, also a much higher level total, and 28.4 officers per 10,000. So that's only 2 people, civilians, per 10,000. But also, it really does reveal as well how there's just a wide gamut of officer levels, right? That I'm sure you could provide much better updated thing. We're preparing this in 2020, and we were preparing it based on 2015 data. Yeah. And there were cities that were higher. Philadelphia had 40 officers per 10,000 people. And again, Austin had 18 officers per 10,000 people at the time. So there's a gamut, and we were kind of not quite mid-range. We were on the slightly higher end for sure. So some food for thought, and these were numbers, again, that we were using and distributing in order to talk about that conversation. So it gives you the range of the size of departments, really varies from cities, but also that ratio of civilians to officers varies. So I'll be sure to send those along. My questions were, of course, partially covered on my colleagues' questions, but I do feel like one of my big concerns, and the concerns that I'm seeing from emails and from conversations with constituents, are about our department's policies to protect people during protests. So I think that was touched on a little bit, but I wanted to give you some time to elaborate. We also talked about this, just to acknowledge that we talked about this in my office. And because I had constituents who were hurt in 2020 attending protests. And so I want to make sure, and there were lots of other people who were just very unhappy at how our police department handled those protests. Whether people who were there on the ground and people who were just were not on the ground. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of address that, because I think there has been some learned lessons. So I'll let you talk.
So, well, back in 2020, just, you know, and again, acknowledging that we have discussed this, you and I, but I was not the incident commander. I was present. I was the commander of narcotics and vice at the time for the city of Pittsburgh. And for that particular protest, I was leading a group of officers, and our role was a covert or undercover role where we were just conducting surveillance in the area to see if, you know, people broke away from the larger peaceful protest and committed acts of violence. So I can't speak to necessarily like the orders that were given or force that was used. That just wasn't my.
That's okay. You can talk about what we do now. And
Oh,
what we're
absolutely.
Going to do.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Again, acknowledging that we've been here for 3 hours.
Yeah. So right now, I will tell you that I've shown up at several of the protests surrounding ICE, and you know, it was really just watching to see how the officers and the supervisors handled themselves and how they kind of navigated that very uncomfortable. You know, when you first get on scene, I think a lot of people were like, "Uh-oh, why are the police here? How are they going to engage?" And I was very happy to see that they went over, they introduced themselves, they explained very clearly, we are not here to police you, we're here to protect you, we're here to protect everybody. And then explained, like, we're going to be floating around the area, just making sure that traffic is not becoming a hazard. If you decide to march or you decide to block the streets, here's my phone number. If you could please let us know that you're going to start marching, we'll have the motorcycles of the traffic officers stop traffic and protect everyone. So it was a much more collaborative approach than we had previously. So I made some phone calls afterwards, and I said, "Hey, is this the way we're doing business now?" Because you have seen a shift nationally in how we respond, and same exact thing in Maryland. Try to do a lot more outreach and transparent conversations on the front end, even before an event, to say, we want to support you. When we show up, here's what we're going to do, and just talk through those things. I received a number of text messages and emails from people attending or organizing protests, both in Maryland and here since I've been back, just being appreciative of how law enforcement engaged with them. So I think that we are definitely in a new era as far as that is concerned. The other thing I will say is, now these have been very peaceful protests, even for the protests that have the propensity to get a little bit more amped up, whether we expect property damage or whatnot, you're seeing a lot of those resources that were very front and center before, like guys with the batons and the shields and the masks. Those resources are being kept kind of out of sight, out of mind until they're necessary. So we are not the ones being viewed as the instigators. And so again, when I got here early on, I said, "Hey guys, we're going to see I think we're going to really start to see a lot of protests. Talk me through what we're doing here in Pittsburgh now." And it was the same thing as where I had just come from. So I think you're starting to see that nationally, and I'm happy to see that that's happening here in Pittsburgh. We want those resources to be available if they're needed in case of emergency, but we're not having them front and center where people view us as, you know, as the aggressors.
Director, I'll direct that question to you as well. Is there a role for not just police, but fire and EMS in, you know, when we see people gathering in large numbers, as is their constitutional right and the right of that, our responsibility to protect their right to be in the right of way, for example?
Yeah, so the other assets will be their responses as required. Usually it's, you know, more of a looking at how we're surrounded. It's more of a law enforcement function on the front end, until such time when there might be some requirement for the other assets. So immediately dispatching wouldn't seem appropriate for those. But I do want to say that, and just I'm coming on tail end of what Chief Lando was saying, that I'm appreciative of the analysis of what's happening in real time and getting people there to make the analysis, to be able to get ahead of and say what's needed to support those functions. And then giving permissions where they don't rise to a level that you have to engage with the rights of individuals to verbalize under their First Amendment rights. Doesn't rise to that level. And I'm just sharing an experience. I was a police officer. It was a Mayday experience, Mayday protest that started downtown. But we walked with these people down the south side, back across, up to the hill, back downtown. Like, we were doing this to what Chief Lando was saying. It was getting a little exhausting for me as an officer. But what I would appreciate why I say that is I think the supervisors were making the analysis and saying where these individuals were permitted to exercise their rights and where they were weighing that against the interests of the public and how we can move that. And it worked and coordinated. I didn't have that understanding as a police officer. I'm like, this is an unlawful assembly. Like, and I'm just suggesting that.
How
for
was
us,
it unlawful?
Well, because they didn't have permits. And
Because
stuff
they
like
were in the car lane, or
that. Yeah, they were blocking
on the
streets
sidewalk?
and for
Blocking-
permits and stuff like that.
So
but
blocking other people's rights to travel. freely.
travel. But even at that, it wasn't an aggressive law enforcement response. It was a balanced response. And I would say that for me on this position, that protecting the interests of the citizens and the First Amendment, I would appreciate that our supervisors or those who are there are making the right analysis, that all of that is taken into account. The interests of those who are peacefully protesting or assembling, but also to what the degree of that, it gets to a point where we can't have them blocking the parkway, or deciding, do we have to make some measures, and they would make that analysis. But as long as those things don't rise to those levels, not to excite this, not to elevate this, and some of the stuff that Chief Lando said is somewhat a different approach than what we were seeing in the past. It would have been, denial of space, putting people in place, stuff like that. I think a more measured response probably gets us to a better point of permissions and allowing people to exercise that. And Chief Lando has been great. When these ones have come up, I get immediate notification and update and situation analysis. He gives me a sit rep about what's happening and how we're moving forward, and telling me in real time if it either conveyed to him and he's up channeling it. And I think that's the right approach for us.
Given the size of some demonstrations, I do think there is probably a more preparedness that we could have with both fire and EMS, instead of just being kind of situationally reactive, right? There are times in history where that people are upset, and this is one of them.
Well, I will say that you can be upset and verbalize your without. I also don't want to elevate it to a point that could alarm. I think we need.
No, I'm saying be prepared for large events.
And some of that
You
large
prepare
events,
for parades, do you not?
we do.
Great, that's all I'm saying.
But also what I'm saying is we have a responsibility to respond to the streets. And if we're pre-positioning some assets, I would say that I would want to make sure that some of those things are done in a manner that doesn't leave us to be deficient in our response. I want the analysis to be made on the scene, and then we send those resources.
Good. We also talked about another category of concern that I think has shifted a great deal. So I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share your experience or identify where you need more expertise, which is that people are rightfully concerned and expressing their concern about surveillance technologies. And these technologies shift so quickly, it's hard for us to keep up with them. We're now hearing that, I think Apple settled a lawsuit that they actually were listening to your conversations. You know how we've all just been thinking we're hallucinating and
Yeah.
our phones were actually listening to us. And I'm talking private conversations, right? The conversations between you and your doctor at any time. So one of the places that council has expressed its desire is to, in an ordinance by a now mayor, Corey O'Connor, when he was on council, and also 2020, that we would not be using proactive facial recognition technology, et cetera. It's nearly 6 years since then. Now some random exercise app on your phone may be tracking you and selling your information to law enforcement, right? Maybe not to the Pittsburgh police, hopefully not, right? So we'll need to make sure that we have closed those loopholes, figured out where these loopholes are, and make sure that we close them if they're there. I hope you know more than I do about this.
Well, I'm by no means a tech guru, but I do understand the concerns, and I think I think every city feels and views, every city leadership feels and views those things, differently. I think that does merit like a larger conversation because, and again, I'm not pushing one way or another, but my only response would be, when we look at our ability to fight crime or prevent crime or catch individuals after a crime, we need to understand, like, if we opt into or out of certain programs, technology programs, that does have the potential to impact our ability.
I don't think you should be opting into any of them, especially unless the citizens know about them.
I agree that the citizens should always know about them. That's why a lot of times you see, like, in most cities, I had a lot of meetings in DC over the past 5 years, and every square inch of DC has cameras. But on every street sign, it says, smile, you're on camera. So the residents are aware. I think we have to find that balance where it's how do we protect privacy rights while also not inhibit our ability to catch people after a crime is committed. And so, again, like, I'm just one voice in that, and I think that is another thing where we would have to come together and talk about what are the programs and technologies that we would want to see here in Pittsburgh. And I know there are some cities that have said, we don't want it. And then, a bank would get robbed downtown, and you'd say, we just have no cameras downtown. Versus Washington, D.C., a bank gets robbed, and that person doesn't make it to the end of the block, and they're picked up on 15 different cameras. And so it does go to our crime-fighting efforts, but we also have to balance that with right to privacy.
I think one of the things that I have figured out in a very unexpert way is that the difference between the cameras that might have captured you, fleeing on foot from a scene or trying to steal from that ATM back in 2014 or smashing that shop window or something, is completely different than in 2026, knowing what Jason Lando just said to his doctor, and that Jason Lando is now traveling from this point to that point, and then Jason Lando is just entering this business and leaving that business, and Jason Lando just bought these things at that store. And that's actually the difference. I mean, that is actually what the technology does now. And so, and in live time, and that's surveillance. And that's a difference.
And that, I think that goes back to my statement that I think that merits a further conversation is as...
And what Jason Lando just said on his Facebook page. And so literally and these things are aggregated by person and being tracked. So yes, let's keep learning and talking about this. I think I said it at the time when we voted on, again, Councilman O'Connor's facial recognition ban, is that this technology changes so quickly. We need to keep updating it. And so that brings me around to the kinds of agreements that other municipalities are doing. Anyway, well, let me first ask you, do I have your commitment to keep updating those, both of you?
I'm sorry,
the surveillance and technology agreements, to working with council, to being sure that whatever technologies you're using, we're talking about them, and to updating our policies on them by what public feedback we're getting.
Absolutely. Yep.
Surely.
Chief Director, yes?
Surely.
Thank you. And then that does bring me back around to, again, lots of conversation has covered lots of the questions that I have in front of me, but to come back, bring it back around to the current immigration and customs enforcement that we're seeing around the country. We know that some cities and certainly some municipalities, even in Allegheny County, have actually signed the 287G agreements with the federal government, meaning that their own employees are now designated officers, deputized as immigration enforcement. And so we are not going to do that.
Correct.
Correct, right? And so this is what we're saying. We're not coordinating. We're not going to sign the 287G.
Oh, 100% correct.
And then also, I'd like us to go further, and we can't do it like right here as we sit, but we, for very good reasons, and for the common good for many years, have coordination agreements and cooperation agreements with a lot of our neighbor municipalities. I think we should re-examine those, especially the ones again, in terms of like, things are different. And so are there backdoors or loopholes? I don't want us to kind of get in a bad situation because we're somehow supporting someone in their federally deputized functions.
Right.
Are you following me? Right? And so I'm going to be following up with you all to talk about that.
And I can tell you that I've had, in my short time here, I've already had direct communication with the entire department in the form of an email that reiterates what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, so we don't have any of these. And not saying that we would, but so we don't have any of these one-off incidents where it's like, oh, I'm being called.
You can't predict what's going to happen, right?
So everyone understands from the chief of police what is expected and what is not allowed. And so I can guarantee you that if there are individuals that decide they're going to take it upon themselves to not comply with those rules, there will be accountability.
Thank you. I think I'm going to follow up with some of these in writing after we kind of sort through them, because some of them are repetitive of each other or other questions that have already been asked today. But I hope that you have heard that we've had some of these questions come in public comment here in chambers, where citizens themselves are asking, are the Pittsburgh police going to protect me? If I'm out on the sidewalk and in the wrong place at the wrong time, regardless of immigration status, even someone who's wouldn't even be in question. And also affirming their rights to protest, as I've summarized already, and civil disobedience that are protected in protected ways. But there's a real fear from people about the inability to be able to tell if someone's truly who they say they are. It's crazy.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I say, just to drive home that point, our officers, the safety thing doesn't fly with me. That whole we cover our faces for safety. I just don't get it. Our officers are out there every day answering calls, apprehending individuals that commit violent crimes, and we all live generally in the same area. I don't understand the logic of allowing someone to wear no identifying marks whatsoever, completely cover their faces, and go out and apprehend people that they likely will never see again and aren't running into at their grocery store with their families. But we don't do that in the Pittsburgh Police. And I think that that absolutely adds to the fear that's out there. And it makes our job more difficult, because I can tell you that I've gotten at least a half a dozen phone calls or text messages in my short time back here where people have said, a community leader has called and said, hey, a van just pulled up on the corner at this intersection and some people jumped out and put handcuffs on a guy. And I said, I'm gonna assume that's ICE. It wasn't us. I mean, we would have badges out if we're in plain clothes and our faces wouldn't be covered. And in those situations, we were able to follow up and figure out that it was ICE. So thankfully, it wasn't a kidnapping. But that makes it a lot more difficult for us too, because we're the ones fielding these calls and having to parse these things out. So you get no argument from me on that.
Thank you for your response. And it also kind of led me to a separate other question, which is that if someone does observe an unmarked van abducting someone, they should call 911 and let us know?
100%. And I will tell you that I was able to establish a point of contact with someone in a leadership role at Homeland Security. And while we certainly won't collaborate with them, and while they're not going to tell us anything ahead of time, we at least got them to agree to notify us after an operation. So if we are getting calls from the community saying, hey, a white van at this intersection just pulled up and these guys jumped out, that I know that hopefully within an hour or so, we'll get some communication from Homeland Security or ICE or whoever's doing the operation that says, hey, we were just at that intersection in a white van. So we're able to squash those issues and we're not chasing down false leads. So we were at least able to get that issue worked out recently. But yes, if someone sees something like that, don't make assumptions, call 911 and let us investigate.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's important that we all do that. And so that, and then also, just for the record, Pittsburgh Police, except for our undercover units, of which we don't have many relative to the total force, right? All of our vehicles are fairly consistently identified, right? There was some repainting of some and some others. So there were some that were still white, and now like, what color are they and what do they look like?
Oh yeah, that's confusing because
it is,
like
right?
I think
I think we should strive to not be confusing.
Well, so I will tell you that happened because over different administrations, and I don't know whether it was chiefs, mayors, whatnot, wanted a certain branding on the vehicles. So we have, I think, like Marty, what do we have now? Like 3 or 4 different, 3 different iterations of, we got the checkerboard ones with the silver cars. We are moving forward all vehicles that have been ordered. I know last year we had a 1-year backlog because vehicles weren't available. We just took delivery of 90 new police cars. They will all be striped with the new pattern, and moving forward, everything will be that way.
I'm not sure which is the pattern that they'll be, like in my own mind.
It's the white with like the
swoosh,
the black swoosh on the side with the city.
That's actually the one I like better. Good.
Yes. So they'll all be striped like that from now on. My concern isn't even so much the marked vehicles; it's the unmarked ones. We do have unmarked cars. Our detectives and our command staff drive unmarked cars. All of those cars have the ability to have, if we flick a button, all the lights will light up, even though you couldn't tell without that, maybe that it's a police car. They can turn lights on. But regardless, if someone sees someone jumping out, like if our detectives are out on a scene and they're doing something, they're going to have their badges out and they're not going to have their faces covered up. And most of the time, they'll even have like what we call a raid vest or external body armor on in addition to a badge. So I can tell you that I would say 99% of the time, you will know that that's a Pittsburgh police officer.
I kind of do feel like we should maybe just put out a helpful, signify, like a little cheat sheet of like, these are Pittsburgh police uniforms. Just as a reminder to people, honestly, like these are the kinds of things when you see this is actually Pittsburgh police.
We can certainly have our PIOs put together like a one-sheeter and put that out on social media. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We do have 130 different municipalities in Allegheny County, and God knows there's also, even in the city, also, like, as you mentioned, school police, the hospitals have their own police, the universities have their own police. There really are multiple law enforcement agencies. So it would be good for people to know, especially in a confusing scene, which ones are which. And I think one of the things, before I wrap up, because now we're approaching 3.5 hours, that one of the things I want to make sure to mention is how supportive people have been of the Office of Community Health and Safety. We talked about this again in my office, but also especially even when it wasn't a 911 call. So a lot of times the public understands that, there's response, or there was co-response, or isn't there, but that OCHS is also working to keep people safe, even if they're just having a mental health crisis, or especially in my district, we've really seen people being, lives saved, no exaggeration, who were just people in need of service, is what it's, I think, the new acronym that we're using, PINS, right? And so we're talking like elderly who were unable to care for themselves, and really in life-threatening situations because they're like ability to care for themselves. And so you want to touch a little bit about kind of where we are in staffing with OCHS and kind of what direction you all see it going? Which is different. Again, I mentioned the kind of mental health and wellness support. There's also reach, and we often have entire, Councilman Warwick's talked to a little bit. We have separate post agendas very often on the violence intervention work and all those kinds of things. So
I think there's opportunity to grow our reach with our community health and safety, our Office of Community Health and Safety. And I say that when I said earlier about dreaming out some of these opportunities, working with Laura as we had some of our initial conversations, I can just assure you that I don't really think of these in a very, limited way. I think some of the issues that we have in our communities require us to really have a very, introspective and a very widening view of what may be happening. And these are some of the resources that gives us that opportunity. And so I can only share with you that that's the way I think, just because of my background. So I've been encouraged for them to look at some, even the things that we do now, as you said, in a very specific way that we have as it relates to some of the ways they are operating. I want to expand on that and the opportunities for that. There are layered things that impact people, to put them in the scenarios and situations that they're in, that result in some public safety response, that if we can come in and think this through and get the help and get people directed towards the help and cared for in ways that we also be able to stave off some of those other responses. So that's just my assurance to this body here. Like, I want to be thinking in those ways. And I got a team, from the teams. I'm really encouraged from the ones that I've met. I've not met them all. And just in discussing with them and hearing and sharing, they are giving me some good opportunities to think about things that I can help support our efforts to grow. And I think you'll see that. During this time frame, I think there will be stuff coming to this table, or stuff that you'll hear about in your district, where you'll see the very things become evidence of us trying to be very intentional about that.
thank you. I'm going to leave with one issue that has been very big, and we've seen a lot of testimony in council chambers, which is about the former VA hospital site. I also did talk with both of you about that. I don't know if you've had the chance to review the criteria that council attached to what is really just the architectural master plan.
I have. Yeah.
Thank you.
By the
Wonderful. And
summer.
so, thoughts?
I again, from our conversations, I know that you and several others have expressed a desire to have that be a very community-oriented property. I think, based on our conversations and the things I've shown you in the packet I gave you, I love to try and be innovative and explore ways whenever possible to include the community. So I would say that you won't get any argument with me from that. I just want to make sure that the public safety entities that would be using those spaces for training, that we have the ability to do that, and that is the primary focus. For instance, if we were to have a track up there, as long as our recruits are able to use that track for the training and qualifications they need to, and we're able to find a way to open that up to the community in the off hours, I think that's a great idea. I just want to make sure that we are able to, use that primarily for public safety. And then the one other thing about not allowing like some of the federal partners up
munitions, not having exactly co-training with ICE, not having
Right, yeah. I
a
mean, we don't-
tactical village. There's both kind of asks and then also prohibitions that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that all of that's, I think that's all that is open to a bigger conversation. But as I walk through our current training facilities, and I'm sure the director, when he walks through the fire and EMS facilities, I think we can all agree that we are in desperate need of something to up our training game. But all of those things are also considerations that we need to look into.
Right, and director as well. One of the asks was that make sure that it really is all branches of public safety, so that there will be space for fire, there will be space for EMS, as part of it being a campus, and a reminder that the letter of agreement with the federal government is not only with the Department of Justice, it also is with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Response, and there is supposed to be emergency management response there as well.
Councilmember Gross, I'm so excited we're getting a better training facility. I don't know what to say. I'm so happy. Like, our training facilities have been deficient and it's not the type of training we are. We've been restricted in our ability to really provide for all of our public safety, not just our police. And I think I've been a recipient of great training across many different of those entities, and now we can expand on that. This is a grand opportunity for the city of Pittsburgh, and you will hear me really, really lead out and say that I emphasize training our personnel and equipping them the best way possible. It goes back to what Councilmember Coghill was saying about our investment in our people. Like, that's the thing that I've probably done the majority of my career is in training. And I just know the value we get, and we get from that. Some of the stuff that you raise in your questioning is ways that we can better equip our responders by doing adequate and appropriate training and having the facilities to be able to do that so that they can increase their decision making and not only just be dispatched in their duties, but they be able to do them in a more measured and appropriate way. So it's going to, across the board, and no one's going to have like property rights to part. I'm hoping that we adequately equip in our facility that will give us, all of our bureaus are saying this is what we need to do that training, and we provide that for them. So no one entity, no one borough is going to have the exclusive on our training facility.
Good, that's glad to hear. And I think I've kept us here long enough. I've had my questions, but not thank you to my staff, not all 51. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. Councilman Mosley?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the acting directors for being here. And as Councilwoman Gross stated, we've been here for a while, so I'll try to, run through these pretty quickly, then follow up where I need to. But I didn't want to direct my first question to Acting Director Williams around emergency preparedness. And I'm going to try not to cover ground that's already been covered substantially. But Director Williams, if you could speak to your specific plans around ensuring that various public safety bureaus are prepared for large-scale emergencies, such as natural disasters and civil unrest, which are two topics that I think are pretty germane and apropos to our conversation. We had a huge storm, earlier in 2025, which took power out for, large swaths of the region for the better part of a week. And we're in a moment right now, a national moment, where there is a lot of civil unrest, and we're anticipating, more civil unrest, as we, move forward, in the days, weeks, and months ahead. So if you could just kind of speak to specifically around your role in large scale emergencies.
Yeah, Councilmember Mosley, thanks for the question. Emergency preparedness in general to natural and man-made disasters, and is an important piece for our public safety at large to be able to understand their role and participation in that. But also, as I had said earlier, like there was a time when we used to train together, and I don't know what has been done since I left. And I'm not disparaging what's done. I just don't know. But what I'm encouraging, as I've said to the individuals that I've been meeting with, I want to return to that. And I also believe that there are opportunities that we haven't capitalized on that I want to make sure that we have provisions for. Again, my experience going around the country and being able to do training, there are departments that are taking advantage of training that's provided based on tax dollars that I don't think, and I'll just say, I've not seen on a level that I would think would be appropriate that our own first responders are participating. This is training already paid for. All we have to do is give them the time to go to that. Their travel's paid for, the training's paid for, the per diem's paid for, their lodging's paid for. So I want to work with our bureau chiefs to figure out, understanding we still have to equip and be prepared to respond to our day-to-day. And this is going to come back to what the chief was saying about personnel, and I think it's the same across the bureaus. But I want to provide those opportunities, and that's where we'll also be able to get some of that other training, because that's already there. The consortiums are there, federal dollars as it exists now until changes come. The money's already been allocated for people to participate, and there are many departments across the country that take it, and not Pittsburgh. Secondarily, I want to invite that in, and having a training facility is going to help us to do that. But again, not all of it where we have to bear the responsibility. I want to find those ways that they provide this level of training, especially when it comes to emergency preparedness. Large cities like ours have to have requirements to be able to do that. And I want to ensure that we're making sure that we're addressing those needs. And so I bring some of those experiences, because that's what I've done for the last, 11, 12, 14 years. I don't know how many, since 2013, so about 12 years, 13 years. And I want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities, working with our emergency management folks, because they get some of these, opportunities, and where they think too, some of our operational plans require that we are moving in certain capacities for preparedness. So yes, it is a priority, and I want us to be prepared. We've had some experiences where we've had some big declaration of emergencies and disasters. We can expect that we might see something in the future. And to your point, that's why I said natural and man-made. Like, we can have some of these events happen, and are we equipped and ready to respond to those? And it comes with making sure we have policies and plans and training and opportunities and exercising them to know how we would work.
Thank you, Director. I appreciate that. My second question is for Chief Lando. You spoke to it a bit on our one-on-one, which I really appreciate your time for, as well as earlier today. And I don't want to take too deep of a dive into it, but I do think it is worth mentioning again. If you could kind of again speak to your strategy for promoting what we see as modern police concepts. Some of the things that you did in Frederick, and if you could just talk about, how are you going to, work to get that buy-in, with members of the force that may not, be as ecstatic about what we may consider, modern policing. And then also, if you could be reflective for a bit, and how would you define, success, in your role, in 2026 and 2027, different from of how you may have defined that role when you joined the force a quarter century ago?
I think, well, to your first point about success, I don't know exactly, I couldn't answer you exactly how I would define it now, but I would say that approaching it from a much more collaborative approach, where we are listening to the voice of the community instead of just being very historically in policing, we've been very siloed. Like, we have our thing, we do our thing. We don't care what about, other departments, or we don't really collaborate with the community. So I think looking back, that's one thing that I value greatly now that I hadn't given a lot of thought to when I was a younger officer and a younger supervisor. Again, I said we were very internally focused, and I think now embracing and partnering with the community is much more important, especially more important now than ever. And then as far as, would you mind just the first part of the question? I think I started writing it down and then I went right on to the second part of the question.
Yeah. Probably just talking about like how you're going to get buy-in, with the force around, promoting those modern policing concepts like therapy and like some of the other innovative things that you've done. Like, what are some of the things that you did in Frederick to get buy-in that you want to replicate here to get buy-in from folks who may, see that as, not, something typically, part of their repertoire, in law enforcement.
I mean, I think for me, it comes down to the one word, and that's transparency. And that could look different in different agencies and in different settings. But I'm a really big believer in transparency. So I talked about the Chiefs, I call it the Chiefs update that I send out twice per month. And that's really closing that loop on, hey, we put something out. Now officers have a chance to offer feedback through the Employee Advisory Committee. And now you're going to hear from me on how things are going, changes we've made. So I think being just very transparent is important. And then another thing that that started almost as I want to say a joke, but almost started as a joke in Frederick was we started a program called Chief for a Day. And I had heard from some officers like, hey, we're putting officers on this crisis response car. Like, that's less officers we're going to have out in the street, or we're doing this program or we're doing that program. And there was just that communication gap. And so I said to my administrative assistant, I said, what would you think if we started a program where any police officer in the department could sign up to spend an entire day with the chief? You go to the meetings I go to, we go to the events together. If we're going to go have a meeting with our mental health partners about the crisis program or whatever, like, they'd be with me all day. And she very lovingly said, oh, I think it's a great idea, but no one's going to sign up for it. And I said, why? And she goes, no one wants to spend a day with the chief. And I said, I don't know how to take that. But we pushed forward and we implemented the program. And we had over 25 officers during the course of the whole program. 25 officers sign up to spend the day with me. And I can tell you that the mindset shift that I saw in those officers and the feedback that I got from the officers was unlike anything that I ever thought I would see. And those officers, this was the best part, those officers went to their roll calls and went to their squad and unit meetings and said, I get it. Like the email that the chief put out about this new program or that, like, I had the chance to spend a day with him. Like, we talked through these things. I went to meetings about those things. Like, this is what the community is talking about. Some of these officers, I gave them a lot of respect for stepping up to do that. But some of these officers were officers that had a very traditional mindset. And just seeing how they changed their mindset after having the ability to spend an entire day with the head of the agency, and how they didn't hold back in telling others about it, to me, that was probably my favorite thing of all the programs we implemented. It gave me a chance to get to know officers on a personal level. It gave them the chance to get to know me. And then they were, and maybe this isn't the best term, but they were my best salespeople, because they would go to their peers and say, hey, give this time. I think this is a good thing. And so that's something I would love to implement here once I get settled a little bit more. But again, it comes back to just being open and transparent and being willing to have those conversations when people do have questions or issues, and not just the traditional, it's the chief's order, so just follow it. That's just not my style.
Thank you, Chief. Quick question around Vision Zero. Councilwoman Ward had mentioned Vision Zero, and this is a specific potential policy change that would relate to, acts of violence. I know that, we'll send social workers, into those situations. And I did get a request from a constituent that I thought was a really good request based on a fatal crash that happened on Beechwood Boulevard this summer, which got a lot of coverage because it was a tragedy. It was a high school student who actually was a classmate of my son at Alderdice. It was a fatal accident, and my question is, would you consider, having in the instance of fatal crashes similar to acts of violence, that are catastrophic, to have social workers, on the scene? This was a scene on Beechwood Boulevard where the parents came. Obviously, there was one young man who was deceased. You could imagine, the emotion and the trauma. But just being that, given statistics that Councilman Strasburger mentioned, earlier, being that these violence incidents involving vehicles in particular are on the uptick, would that be something that you would consider as well as having, if resources and manpower allows, to, in the incident of fatal crashes, which we know are in the increase, to also have that same kind of social worker infrastructure to support, families similar to, acts of violent crime. And that's for both nominees.
Yes, for me, that these are traumatic experiences. Like whether it is if somebody's responded to the scene, and even in the investigatory stages of that, like sometimes there's a prolonged positioning of that, or the bystanders or people witnessing and stuff like that. But it's traumatic. And I think there are other opportunities. You mentioned fatal crashes, but I think there's other opportunities as well that if it's in the scope and we can shape that, and we have the resources, to me, I feel like it would be value added to help navigate those. My wife is working out. She's a therapist, but she's, I had some contact related to public safety with some of the foundational folks, and they brought up about trauma. Hers is in traumatology, and just trying to make those connections too. That I want to know what they developed that can wrap back around to public safety from some of our some of those organizations. So, to my point is, that's the forward thinking, and that I hope that you hear, and I'm glad you offered that. See that this has impact to our communities, and being able to have a response that's adequate so we can manage that. It's a yes from me.
In the interest of time, I'll say ditto. I mean, I agree. Crisis response doesn't need to be limited to someone who might be suicidal or having a mental health crisis. If someone's witnessed or experienced something tragic and we can get them help, I don't see why we wouldn't do that.
Thank you. And just a couple more questions, like you said, in the interest of time. I did just want to, touch base, about ICE, and thank you, for your responses. Thank you for your responses on the violence interrupters as well as the public safety center. I have some questions in that arena. I'm not going to ask them out of the interest of time, but specifically around ICE, I did have one burning question that I totally understand about, not intervening, when there's, federal law enforcement, activities going on. But from a constitutional standpoint, is there any arena, given, the fear that, has been shared by my colleagues, that the public has shared with us about the moment that we're in right now nationally, is there a potential situation at which the Pittsburgh police would intervene in ICE operations, under any circumstances, particularly around, potentially violating, constitutional acts, or if they appear to be breaking the law? Is there a particular, threshold, or is it kind of what you explained, earlier, you kind of stay back and then, assess later? But would there be in either of your estimates a situation where they could cross a threshold that would then demand Pittsburgh police intervention?
So, thank you. I appreciate the question. That is probably that's probably one of the most complex questions, because there's not a clear answer. And I say that because 9.9 times out of 10, we wouldn't, probably 10 times out of 10, we're not going to be there when the incident begins to unravel. It's something that we would be called to because the situation has gotten out of control and someone's yelling for help. Whether the call comes in from the ICE side or the community side, and then our officers are going to be arriving and have to very quickly assess the situation and figure out what's going on. The reason I say it's a case-by-case basis is if they arrive on scene and an ICE agent is engaged in a use of force with someone and trying to apprehend them, those officers aren't going to have the benefit of knowing how that situation began and if that use of force was legitimate or not. So for them to intervene at that point would not be appropriate. Now, I will say, if anyone crosses the line and they are overtly violating someone's constitutional rights, I think that any Pittsburgh police officer would say, I'm not going to stand by and watch this. But again, that's very nuanced, and also these situations tend to unravel very quickly. And so I wouldn't want to, it's not that I don't want to, I just couldn't say definitively, yes, in this situation we would intervene. The last thing I would want is for officers to arrive on scene while ICE officers are engaged in a lawful operation and they feel pressured to intervene, and then they become the target of a federal investigation, or they are arrested because they intervened in an operation. So when I say, I mean, there's a lot of layers to peel back on that, and I do think it merits further conversation. And to touch on some of our comments earlier that we discussed, really us to sit down with the city attorney and talk through these issues. So if we are placed in the situation, there's kind of guardrails in place. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Director Williams, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that before my final question.
No, sir. I would just be echoing the very same things he said, and rephrasing, but saying the same thing. I don't have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question or comment, or it might be a combination of both, is that I really appreciated the comment about on-ramps. I appreciate particularly my conversation this morning with Acting Director Williams around paramedicine and creating on-ramps into public safety, as well as looking at Westinghouse, which obviously is in my district. I think it's a great opportunity to create that as an on-ramp into public safety careers. Particularly not only having Westinghouse program, but having the University of Pittsburgh as well as community college, right there in close vicinity. Just wanted to get your thoughts about potential partnerships with those two post-secondary educations. Obviously, the Department of Public Safety as well as Westinghouse High School is a very intentional and deliberate on-ramp into bringing folks into public safety careers, being that we all share around this table the need to want to bring more folks within the ranks of public safety, and that's across the board, whether it's animal control, EMTs, fire, as well as I know the chief had mentioned, getting the ranks of the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police back up. Your thoughts about if there's any best practices or models you've seen around the country at creating those on-ramps of getting folks from the communities, from the city, homegrown talent, and getting those into the ranks of public safety professionals.
I certainly have, sir. Especially in regards to EMS and fire. There are ways, like individuals or junior EMS or junior firefighters in other cities and other areas where they get certain levels of certification that allows them to ride along or participate at certain levels even while they're in high school, and then you can continue on the certification moving forward. So I would look at, are there opportunities? Ours is a little different only because of how people enter into our workforce as EMTs or EMTs, paramedics, or firefighters. Police officers are a little different. You know, you have to have, it's a little different in that, but I think the exposure to at least build the interest is there from a high school level. I just don't know that there are levels of certification we could provide for them. So if we would work with the Pittsburgh Public Schools, I like the fact it's an opportunity at Westinghouse, and I'm desiring to encourage our efforts to participate with that, like really collab with them to help them in that program. It's already existing. And so they have instructors, like, do we rotate some instructors to help to be tangible and provide some of the instruction, like how they're setting it up? But I would really like to see this in other parts of the city. I don't think it should be exclusive in the East End. I want to see it in the South Hills. You know, I want to see it on the North Side. Like, is there an opportunity that now gives a potential opportunity to our youth to go into these career fields, and we can grow responders from within, from our city schools, if they decide to, almost like, and I'm calling it this, even like trade programs that used to exist back in the day, like, and then we can actually have a pathway where we can onboard them into our workforce. I think that would be a great opportunity, and if we can grow that out, I want to explore that. So it'll just start with the existing program. Where can we come alongside Westinghouse to help them with that program? I've had some of those conversations previously. Now I get to have them in my role or designate somebody. But this is Pittsburgh specific. Pittsburgh Public Schools, can Pittsburgh Public Safety participate with that? And once we have an established opportunity there, can we grow this in other high schools across the city?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That exhausts my questions. If I have any follow-ups, I'll email those out. But I thank you for your willingness to serve. Thank you for your patience. And sitting through a long meeting, and apologies for having to join, virtually. But it's been that kind of week, as we all know. But I defer back to the chair.
Thank you. I'm scrolling through my list. I believe almost every question I had has now been checked off. I will make, I guess, a comment, then maybe a question. One of the themes I heard sort of being talked about was both over-policing as well as sort of legislative bodies passing laws that then aren't necessarily always implemented. So as an example, Councilwoman Warwick brought up the traffic policy that we passed in 2021, which was to basically not pull over cars for minor offenses. So you have a broken tail light, we simply mail you a ticket, right? We don't need to engage you for something like that. Excuse me. My understanding, however, is that due to union pushback as well as potential, not arbitration, accreditation concerns at the state level, we're not really enforcing that. So I'm just curious of your thoughts.
That is something I would have to look into, because I was not aware that I was aware of the policy that was implemented. I was not aware of it not being enforced. So I will follow up with you on that.
Okay. Same thought along it was also brought up around marijuana. I think you were here when we actually passed that bill, where we made it a civil citation as opposed to a state misdemeanor. And after we passed it, we actually saw an uptick of state misdemeanors being handed out, especially in certain pockets of the city. So I'm just curious of your thoughts around enforcing that. And from your perspective, Chief, is there a clear directive to prioritize civil citations over state misdemeanors for small amounts of marijuana? I forget the exact amount at this point.
Yeah, again, I'm happy. I will actually have our crime analysis team pull those stats and look at where we are now. To me, there's so many cities and states now where marijuana is legal. And so that's just not a priority. It just can't be a priority. We have so many other things to worry about. But I don't have the stats right now as far as recent numbers, but I'm happy to look into that. I'll have our crime analysis team pull those stats and put something together. Like, we can do a 5-year trend and show you where we are now as opposed to where we were back in 2021 with those citations. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's just not a priority.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And then lastly, along those same veins, there's sort of an older police tactic that especially I've seen used outside of, well, particularly black bars in our city, where officers will say, well, there's people outside smoking marijuana, and what they'll do is they'll go and use their flashlights and just start flashing lights into cars looking for something that could be wrong. Is that sort of a tactic you would endorse, or do you say that's probably unnecessary?
So I will say it to my knowledge, it doesn't really have anything to do with marijuana. I know that if we get complaints about firearms, I could tell you that if there's a complaint about firearms or we have shootings around a bar, then officers would go and look in the parking lot. Again, not opening the cars, but if they see something in plain view, like they see a firearm in plain view, that would be the basis for an investigatory stop to follow up further. I mean, that is a way that we legally get guns off the street, but I have not seen that for marijuana. I mean, not for many years. That was an old thing for marijuana. But we're talking about firearms now and shootings.
Okay. Thank you. There was one other thing that was mentioned. A number of members have mentioned it. Councilwoman Gross, I think, was the last person to mention it. But I do think it would be helpful if we had, back in the day, they used to have officer friendly. They used to come into the schools, and one of the things they left behind was a sort of Bill of Rights. So we as children could actually learn. Just yesterday evening, my daughter started asking me about, does she have to show ID if ICE or someone stops her on the street? So we started having this conversation. But I do think it would be helpful if we were able to make, on the city's website somewhere, a very basic know your rights. Here's what they are. Here's what they are not. Here's why an officer will pull you over. No, we're not in and I forget what it's called, but one of the states where they can just stop you and ask for your name. And then also at the same time, if ICE does A, here's B, right? Like, if this, then that. And even Councilwoman Gross was saying, and here's what our uniform looks like, just so you're aware of who we are and who we are not. I do think it'd probably be helpful if we just create a basic one-pager of public safety, Bill of Rights, that we could then either an individual could download, a council person we could download and take it to community meetings, take it to public safety council meetings if we wanted to, and we could probably even help you compile it. I know BPIP has put something like this together before. I forget who you mentioned, someone else having put one together. Oh, the Citizen Police Review Board.
With BPIP. Yep.
With BPIP, okay. Yep. So we may even already have 90% of it, but I do think it'd be helpful if we put it online. That way, when we get calls about it, we had a woman call in to our meeting this morning saying, how do we know how to go about this sort of stuff? We could say, here it is, share it amongst your peers, your citizens. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor for us to undertake, and I don't think it would be that hard for us to help. So,
full endorsement on my part for that. I think is wise and great to do.
I think that was all I actually had. Anything else for the good of the order?
Just a closing comment.
Okay.
Just a closing comment and 4 questions for both of you. No, I just want to say, through things all, I just want to kind of put this on record. I represent one of the largest immigrant communities from mostly Latin America, in the way of Beachview and Carrick as well. We would like to see a officer or an officer, and I work close with the representatives of the Latin American community there. Spanish-speaking police officer would be really great. We actually had an incident at one point where somebody got, taken in, a young kid, and there was no communication. They couldn't communicate, and it was all solved and resolved. But yeah, either that or even Commander Ripple has suggested that he would require his police officers, who he covers, Beachview, to learn Spanish, and I know the Spanish community has reached out to me and said they would love to, offer those lessons. So just, something moving forward. ShotSpotter, I just wanted to also say I'm a big fan of it. Every police enforcement officer, every chief I talk to is a big fan of it. Every lieutenant, we had a shooting up in Brookline the other day. Nobody could pinpoint where it's from. I love the accuracy of that. It's a really, really good thing. I love what you're saying, Chief Lando, about getting into schools. That's fantastic. Undetected, coming in as not with your badges and your uniforms. I'd like to see that continue. And to what you just said, Mr. Williams, yeah, we need it in the South Hills too. We need it all over the city, but I would love to have that. My former high school, Brashear. One final thing. I agree with you 100%, and so do the leaders in the Latin American and the Latino community, is we do not want to put a bullseye on ourselves by waving flags and saying no ICE, no ICE, no ICE, okay? We don't want that. Nobody wants that. But at the same time, I know from the leaders that I speak to, they frequently tell me, just be quiet, we don't have those hardened criminals or, whoever they're supposed to be chasing around. And we just don't want the attention. And when you bring the attention to yourself, especially knowing the current atmosphere, you almost welcome it. So one final thing, Mr. Williams, we talked about this, and thank you for calling me, unfortunately, with our first homicide the other day. I'm not asking you to call me for every homicide. Hopefully, those are far and few between. But I would like to know whether it's an officer that's in an incident or there's a shooting of some sort, that not only myself, and I could be the contact person, but the person whose district that takes place in, because we get the calls, I get the calls, and the representative of that district is going to have to answer to the press, and it's just good policy for us all to be on the same page. Obviously, when you're in a scene, I don't expect you to pick up the phone and call me, but if you have maybe Emily or Kara reach out just to kind of fill us in so we're not caught off guard with the press, and we could at least say something to the nature. Of course, we don't want you to tell you anything you're not supposed to, but we could at least say we're in communication. There are people in the scene, so that's important. So with that, I will say, I think Mayor O'Connor has made a really good choice with both of you. You have my full confidence. I think your nomination will sail through. I'm not speaking for the others, but I have a pretty good inkling that we're going to sail through. And welcome aboard, and let's get to work. Thanks.
Can I make one final thing that I forgot? I just wanted to.
Let me do this first, because I will let you. But Councilwoman Gross also had a quick question.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Apologies. And not to keep us long, but I have two other items that I will follow up with you on. I don't want my constituents in Highland Park and Morningside to think that I forgot to ask you about the firing range and sound mitigation, because we have talked about it at length, and I will be following up. So no need to reiterate it here, but we have commitments to work on that. And then secondly, I will be following up on some concerning, I think, behaviors with our nuisance bar task force and a raid that was on P-Town in the last year that didn't need to go the way it went and was really distressing to the very peaceful gathering at a bar that is not a nuisance. And so the question that we will be talking about is, why was the nuisance bar task force sent to a bar that is not a nuisance bar, does not meet any of the qualifications or thresholds of the nuisance bar, that is in ordinance, and was sent with SWAT, and it was evacuated, and it was inordinate. It was I've lost my words. It's late in the day, but it was way out of people's comfort levels, and it was uncalled for. So we'll be following up with that. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I do have one last question. Low-level offenses, be it a traffic stop, a consent search, anything of that nature, do officers have to document the reasons for those?
Absolutely. We document everything, and it's on body camera.
Okay.
And in addition to that, that we have search and seizure forms that are filled out, and it goes through a supervisory review process. So if it was found to be an inappropriate search, that there's an accountability measure. Okay.
Is there a metric to also review it for potential racial disparities?
I would just have to look into that. I mean, we're looking for reasonable suspicion or probable cause. So the reasonable suspicion or probable cause cannot be race-based, obviously. I think I'm sorry.
Part of the reason why I'm asking is we now have a federal government who has made federal rulings saying you can now begin looking at someone's skin color and saying, I need to stop you. So I'm just worried about how that will affect us locally.
We will absolutely not be subscribing to that law or whatever that is. We just don't do that here. I mean, and again, it goes back to wanting to maintain the community trust and wanting people to call us when they're having an emergency. And if they think that that's how we conduct ourselves, we're going to be working against our goal and our mission.
Thank you. What you wanted to share?
I meant to say it while he was here and I forgot, and I just wanted to put it on the record. You know, I talked a lot about the things that we've done in the past month and the things that have been going on in the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, but Assistant Chief Marty Devine was left in a very difficult spot after Chief Scorado left, and he did, I think, a heck of a job leading the Bureau of Police. And I just wanted to make sure that we publicly acknowledge the work he did, because I don't necessarily know that was the task he wanted to take on, but he did. And I think that we wouldn't be in the pretty good place that we are in today if it wasn't for his efforts over the past year. So I just wanted to acknowledge him. And that is all.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Marty's a very dear personal friend of mine, a lifelong friend of mine. And I couldn't agree with you more. I wanted to say that while he was here, but thank you for acknowledging that. I think he did a super job in a very difficult situation he walked into. So
Thank you.
Thank you. If seeing nothing else, then we've exhausted the purpose and the business of this meeting. We are adjourned.
Thank you.